All right, good morning, everybody. It is 10:02 on January the 12th, 2023. Happy New Year to everybody. Calling to order the Texas State Board of Examiners of Psychologists. Ms. Moore, will you take roll for us?
Sure, Mr. Adler. Oh, okay, I see your hand. Dr. Becker.
Present.
Okay, we have Ryan. Is Ryan here yet? Okay. Dr. Calhoun. Dr. Cartwright.
Here.
Dr. Lambden. Dr. Lambden, are you present? Can you hear us? I don't think she can hear. Dr. Singh?
Present.
Mr. Zagaris? Okay. Dr. Lambden, are you able to hear? Does she have to verbally say she's present? We see her.
No, we can see her, we can count her, but we need to fix that audio before we.
Okay.
Maybe send her a message or something, a chat.
Yeah.
And Mr. Zagaris, can you hear us? Mr. Zagaris? Okay, we have a quorum. We have a quorum, correct?
Yes.
All right, let's go ahead then. And do we have any public comment?
No, we had one written comment, but it's from an applicant, just making sure that she has the opportunity to present to the board when it comes to her application.
Okay, and we'll get back to that then.
Okay.
All right, so let's stand at ease for just a minute because I do want the whole board to hear the board administrator's report.
Okay, just
Dr.
one,
Linden.
I'm sorry,
Dr.
Mr.
Dr.
Palermo.
Lambden's trying to reconnect her audio. She's having trouble getting her audio connected.
Okay, we do have one person with their hand raised for a public
Oh,
comment
okay.
for
Then
verbal.
Let's go ahead and hear that then.
Okay, 1 second. It just switched around on me. Mr. Snyder?
Yes, ma'am. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yes.
All right. You want me to go ahead and get started?
Yep, public comment is limited to 3 minutes, so take it away.
All right. Thank you. My name is Rob Steiner. I am speaking on behalf of myself. I'm a licensed specialist in school psychology. I'm also a licensed psychologist with provisional status. Anyway, good morning, and thank you for the work that each of you guys do for our profession. I just wanted to briefly comment from an applicant's perspective on the mandate that ASPPB, that all member states and provinces will eventually require the EPPP Part 2. So aside from a small handful of states and provinces, very few boards have adopted it yet. To the association's credit, they are giving jurisdictions about 3 years, pretty generous time frame to adopt this. Consequently, it is my hope that the board will avoid an impulsive, hasty, and reactive decision on when to formally adopt this additional barrier to practice. Really, there's no immediate sense of urgency or rush. 2026 is quite a while away. However, in the meantime, I would encourage the board to solicit input from stakeholders, and that would include applicants. Potentially formulate a few options and provide sufficient grace for those of us like myself who are already licensed on a non-renewable license. Worth considering would be exempting current license holders from Part 2 who are on a 2-year provisional status. Such action would provide predictability to us applicants and remain consistent with us fulfilling the remaining requirements for active licensure as we knew it when we were first licensed. A seamless and smooth transition is deserving and quite possible. In addition, implementing the EPPP Part 2 too quickly would likely produce a shock to hundreds of applicants. Preparing for Part 1 itself can take up to a year of preparation, and the same is almost certainly true for a new, somewhat untested and unfamiliar Part 2. Finally, considering the diversity of applicants, timelines, and progress towards licensure would seem to be critical and appropriate considerations by the board. Thank you so much to each of you for your time and your deliberation.
Thank you, sir, for your input this morning. We really appreciate you taking the time to share your thoughts and experiences with us.
Thank you.
Very good. All right. Anybody else for public comment? Ms. Moore?
No, there are no hands raised, and I don't think we have any call. There's no callers. So.
Okay. Let's go straight to the board administrator's report if you're ready for that, Ms. Moore.
Could you say that one more time? I'm sorry.
If you're ready for the board administrator's report.
Oh, okay, sure, no problem. Give me 1 second here. Okay. So the council's report measures are in the meeting packet for review. I didn't have any particular comments on it. So under the SIPAC, just so you're aware that the SIPAC voted to require renewals for those holding the APIT and the TAP credentials through the SIPAC. So starting this year, they're going to have a renewal, which will be $20 per license type. And I guess they'll be rolling out information on how that would occur. And for ASPPB, we do have a mid-year meeting coming up in April, which will be April 27th through the 30th. It will be in Denver, Colorado. And I want to open it up for any board members that are looking to attend that meeting.
We need to send one, is that correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So I went to the last one. I would be happy to go again, but if somebody else wants to volunteer to go, I would be happy to yield as well. And I think we would need a motion and an approval to send somebody.
I make motion that Mr. John goes again.
All right, it's been moved to send me. Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded.
Well,
Any-
I was gonna say, before you do that, John, I know that you don't mind going, but if you want a psychologist to go, I can go this year if you don't want to go again. If
I
you
would be-
actually want to send a psychologist to the meeting, I can go this year.
I would be happy to yield if you'd like to go. And I'd love to download with you kind of with a more in-depth of what was at the last meeting for some continuity there and have as much of my information as possible.
Yeah. I just, I will put it out there, particularly with the stuff coming out with the EPPP and with what was brought up just now with the public comment. I do think it might be helpful to have some professional representation there to hear what's being put forth. So I don't mind going, is what I'll say.
Would there be a friendly amendment to the motion to send Dr. Becker instead?
I make a motion to send Dr. Becker to the conference instead because of the things that are coming up with EPPP.
Dr.
And-
Singh, are you okay with that motion your motion being amended that way? Dr. Singh?
Well, I'm not sure. I feel like Mr. Wilomovich wants to go, or he wouldn't have volunteered. And if he's the chair of the board, he needs to know about all these things just as much as anybody else.
Daryl, do we have, I guess, is it a budget constraint on sending two?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
we just budget for one staff and one board member
Okay,
to go. I'm planning on attending this thing as well because of the CCCP Part 2 that's coming up. I'm gonna try to go. If I can't, then Diane or Tim, I'm gonna tap one of them to go in my stead, depending on their availability. But this is probably something we've got to stay on top of. We're gonna need to be there and be on the ground as they're talking about this. So I'm fine. I don't care what board member goes. I just need one of you there.
yeah.
So I agree with Dr. Becker. I mean, you're delegating, John. That's what, you have to do sometimes. So, and I think especially there's, psychology related, like, content at the meeting. So I sense that, you could go, but I sense you're happy, you're more than happy to let Dr. Becker go and understand the reasoning. So that was my sense of what just happened.
I thought
So-
you were taking one for the team here.
I
Is-
took one for the team last time, and I'll just tell you candidly, that was a long meeting, and I did not need to be there for the whole thing, for the time away from home, family, the hotel. I didn't need to be
Enough
there
said.
the whole time. So that is something for the future that I'm going to be looking at the schedule to say how many days and what days do I need to be there for. So this one, how many days is this? This is 3 days. This is shorter. So maybe they'll pack more in, but for the annual meeting, I did not need to be there for the whole time. So, but I'm happy to yield to Dr. Becker. I don't think it would be a bad thing to have. I've formulated a lot of my own thoughts and opinions. I'm glad I went, and I'd probably like to go to the next annual meeting. And as a matter of tradition, it may not even be a bad idea to alternate between public and professional members. I was kind of a unicorn there as a non-PhD board chair.
Interesting word to use, but
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah. So I was glad I went. I found it very insightful. But I am happy to yield to Dr. Becker if she'd like to go to this one.
And I'm pretty confident that that Dr. Becker can relay the information well to all of us as well. So I think that should be my.
Yeah.
Listening to this, I feel like I could change my motion or withdraw. What would you like me to do?
I think without objection, if there's no objection, I'd say the board's deemed to send Dr. Becker, and
Okay.
as long as no one objects. So
I
Dr.
second.
Becker.
I second it then.
All right, without objection, it's adopted. Dr. Becker, go forth and represent us well.
That's April the 27th, you said?
27th through
Yeah.
30th in Denver.
It'd be interesting if it was April 20th, but never mind. Saying.
Yeah, usually the 27th, there's a board administrator meeting. So the conference really doesn't start till like Friday. So
Cool.
Well, I don't think they have the bark at the mid-year meeting. I think that's only at the annual meeting. So because I've showed up one year thinking there was a bark at the mid-year and there's not. So
Okay.
that's the only reason I remember it.
Okay.
Good deal. All right.
So the other thing
Moving on.
about ASPPB, just to note in that newsletter that's in your packet, they do have a segment on the examination services and, reminding people that the January 2026 EPPP will be a 2-part exam. So, for the state of Texas, we do need to have some discussions on how we plan on handling that if it does go through. It's still a 3-year, 3 years out, but I don't know if you want to start putting it on our agenda to discuss it further. So.
I will say this is the most consequential thing that ASPPB is doing, I think, at this moment. And coming back to the annual meeting, candidly, I was disappointed for the fact that, again, the most consequential thing to come out of the meeting was not deliberated, was not discussed, was not voted on by the members. We were told essentially the same time the email went out to the whole wide world of sports of the decision that had been made. And I guess, and even looking at the newsletter, what I'm having a hard time with is the fact that it just seems like an afterthought to ASPPB about there are 50 different states with different regulatory structures and different statutory structures of how we operate. And there's just so much more to this and adopting this at this point. And so, adding another barrier, adding an additional cost, like if we're asked by other stakeholders or the ledge or whoever else, why are you adding this additional barrier? I don't have a good answer for them right now. And that's my challenge right now. So. Definitely open to other thoughts from the board at this point. Okay.
I'm not sure that we have enough information to really get into it. I certainly don't.
Well,
Yeah,
that's, I mean, that's a
about it.
I
key,
think there's a lot of
that's a key
confusion
point right
surrounding it
there.
at this point, so.
Say that
gathering
again, Doc.
information right now.
Dr. Carter, will you say that again?
I just said, yeah, I agree with Dr. Becker and I think there's just a lot of confusion surrounding it, and just, again, information gathering, trying to find out, I guess, premise behind it and everything else surrounding the details of and the implementation, everything else, and state adoption, state to state adoption of it, and how it all will work. I think just a lot of questions in the air right now about it. Don't have a lot to say about it. We don't really necessarily know how it's going to go down.
The ASPPB has published, I think, some videos detailing a lot of what you're talking about, Dr. Cartwright. I'll see if I can hunt that up and share it all with you, because part of the problem when you have like new board members come in, this all started probably 2 appointments ago. And those boards were much more familiar with how this all came about and kind of the thinking behind it. And, now we've cycled in new board members and y'all are not. So from a staff perspective, I was there kind of in the beginning, so I'm very familiar with it, but I get what you're saying. Let me see if I can find those videos. One thing I would suggest is, if after watching the videos, y'all still have questions, we probably need to get with Dr. Becker, and that way she knows what to ask of the folks whenever she goes. And she can do it offline with them, kind of just sitting down over a drink or something. She could talk with them about it. But that way y'all they may not be able to answer everything you're going to ask. I don't know, but at least she can ask the question and try to gather that information. But I think a lot of the questions you're going to have will probably be addressed by those videos. I'll gather those up and have Diane send them to share them with all of you.
That would be helpful for Dr. Lambton and myself and John as well, because we're going to do that Q&A here. I don't know, it's in February. I can't remember the date. So that would be definitely helpful, because we could share some of that information in that Q&A with the public. So that would be awesome.
Yes, I agree with that. That would be very helpful. Thank you for suggesting that.
Very good.
Okay, and the
Ms.
last
Ford?
thing,
Yeah,
yeah,
go
the
ahead.
last thing I have for my report is the insights over lunch. So we do have our first one scheduled for February the 15th at 11 o'clock Central Standard Time. It'll be 1 hour in length via Zoom. So the topics is yet to be determined, but typically we'll have some type of discussion and then open it up to the public to just ask the board questions. Just random questions is usually how it goes. So I'm looking forward to that one. And that
Perfect.
concludes my report.
All right. Thank you very much. Moving on to item 5, selection of TSB EP council members to BHEC.
Yeah.
This
The
term, help me out on the term. When is this term date against it? 4 years?
2
2 years.
2 years. And it's the professional members starts February 1st. Odd years, and the public member is February 1st of even years.
Good deal. And right now that is Dr. Cartwright. I think he's done a fabulous job. So the floor is open for discussion and or nominations.
I'd like to nominate Dr. Cartwright to continue in that role.
All right, it's been moved by Dr. Becker that Dr. Cartwright continue in that role for the next term. Is there a second?
Yes, I
And
would like to second that. motion.
Seconded by Dr. Lambton. Is there any discussion? I just like to say that,
I'd gladly do it. I'll gladly serve on PHEC again.
good. Glad to know you're willing again. I just want to say that I think Dr. Cartwright has done a great job representing this board, and then also bringing forward thinking, clear communication from his perspective, which is obviously different from mine as a public member. So it's been great working with him. So all in favor of Dr. Cartwright? If there's no further discussion, is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All is in favor of Dr. Cartwright signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Thank you, Dr. Cartwright. Congratulations.
Thank you.
All right. Moving right along. Enforcement. What do we, let me go back to my materials here. Do we have dismissals to review?
Yes. Give me 1 second.
Mr. Bridges, are you going to go through this with us? Or who?
I will, if you have any questions on the orders, I'll go through.
Does anybody have any questions? Hearing none. Do we need to go over ISC assignments?
Yes. So it's on page 21 in your meeting book. So the December 1st through February 29th, 2024, we would need some volunteers for that panel.
All right, we have on the cycle previous to that, we have Dr. Becker, Mr. Zaguris, and myself. Then
So you mean it's December 1st, 2023 to February 2024, right?
That's correct.
So I hope I will still be on the board at that time. So I'm happy to put my name down because my term, I think, ends October 31st. But like I said, I will hopefully I'm still on the board, and then you can put my name down.
All right, Mr. Adler. Dr. Lambton.
Yes, I'm happy to serve if I may.
Absolutely. And then need a public member. I can either volunteer Ryan in his absence because he's not here to speak up against himself, unless Dr. Calhoun, you'd like to do it.
And Ryan's the same situation as me. So in
Okay.
terms of as well as and Doni. So who knows what the future holds.
Well, we can always change it if that's the case.
Change the future.
Well, Philip will make an amendment.
You want to do it?
Any other volunteers? All right, I'm gonna go ahead.
Ryan.
You said yes?
I recommend Dr. Ryan.
Okay, we'll go with Ryan. Ryan's been volunteered and cannot speak up in his defense, so. All right, so Adler, Lambton, and Ryan Bridges. Perfect. Go back to where we are. Sorry, did we have dismissals for board ratification?
No, sir.
All right. Nothing at SOA?
Nothing finalized.
Okay. Are we ready to go to applications? Am I missing anything, staff, before we move on to 7? All right, hearing none, let's move on to 7. Appeal of application denial. Let's start with, we're gonna start with Brittany Burns. that sound right?
Yeah,
Ms. Moore, who was it that was here that wanted to speak on this, on one of these items?
Nelson for sure. I'm gonna check to make sure she's here. Yeah, she's in attendance. Let me see if any others are. Brittany Burns is here, if you want to allow her to speak.
I would, if she would like, no one has to. I want to be clear, if they're listening, no one has to speak, but if you'd like to speak, to give us any color here in person, we would love to hear it if they would like to share. So we're gonna
You
do,
want her to talk to say yay or nay.
pardon?
So I'm gonna bring her on if she wants to speak.
I'd be happy to speak if able.
Absolutely.
I just want to address the board and say thank you this morning for considering my appeal. Tricky COVID and scheduling complications permitted me to complete all degree requirements and not make the administrative date for a summer degree conferral. However, what I've provided in my materials is a letter from our DCT stating just that I had met all degree requirements in time for the submission of my application. And it is an administrative kind of technicality that my degree is now confirmed to be conferred next week.
So the question was the degree had not been conferred. All coursework was complete. It was just a matter of the school actually doing the paperwork to confer the degree. Is that
Yes, sir.
correct?
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
There was no additional classes that needed to be taken.
Correct.
Okay. I don't have any other questions. Does the board have any questions? Mr. Adler?
Yes, hi, Dr. Burns. When you answered the question on the application, that you had a doctorate degree in psychology at the time of the application, you were, did you have, what did you have in mind about, kind of like this, the school, paperwork coming in late, and you're aware of that, and yet you check that question? Can you just kind of talk about like your thought process, that you were gonna be conferred, but it hadn't been done yet, but yet you said you had a doctorate in the application? Just a little bit about like, how you made sense of that question as you answered it.
Yes, absolutely. This was based on guidance and precedents from others in my program who through the pandemic had experienced similar situations. My degree is of course from a school in a different state. And so there had been different application processes in that regard. But I made sure I was transparent on the date of degree conferral in case that became an issue and there was difference in perspective.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, of course.
Any other questions from the board? All right, hearing none. Thank you, doctor, for speaking with us.
Thank
Discussion
you.
from the board.
I
Mr.
think
Adler?
if there's a concern about, misleading information with the council, I think that's, probably a little bit, I wouldn't totally agree with that statement, the 882.34. I think maybe she didn't know how to answer it at the time, and I'm not sure if at the same time of the application, she qualified it with this information, but I don't, my sense is that it wasn't for the purpose of trying to cheat or trying to say she has something that, she doesn't have. It was a matter of this messiness with, administrative stuff. So
yeah,
that's what I feel about the situation. And I would
Yeah,
be
I don't-
happy to approve the application.
I also think it's a culture difference in Texas schools and schooling and programs that occur outside of the state, having been trained outside of this state. It is very common in other states for you to defend your dissertation and for everyone around the table to say, congratulations, Dr. So-and-so, you are now officially a psychologist. and for folks to feel as if they have had their degree conferred at that moment. And in some states that does happen. So I can understand some of the confusion in walking into a licensing situation in another state and answering that question differently. It doesn't make it okay, and it doesn't interpret the question differently from the standard of the law, but I can understand how that can be confusing to someone coming into another state. And I do believe that that is what may have occurred here.
I can see the tea leaves where this is going, but let me chime in here on this. Dr. Burns, I understand that you may be justifying, answering the question, going ahead and applying before the conferral of the degree, but the simple fact of the matter is you applied before you were eligible. The rule's very clear on it. I don't care what your colleagues did when they applied with other jurisdictions. I will say this, most other jurisdictions are just like us. They require conferral of the degree before you apply. And what you've done is you've caused a lot of extra work and headache for my staff by applying before you were actually eligible. And we've now had to go through this process. So I'm a little frustrated with that. Now, like I say, I can read the tea leaves. I think where this is going, but my cautionary statement to you is don't do this again. If you see the law and it's clear, follow the law, wait until you are fully eligible before you apply, because it causes a lot of wasted effort on our end, which neither I nor my staff, I don't want to speak for the board, but I can say neither I nor my staff appreciate.
Yes, sir. I completely understand, and my sincerest apologies to everyone. It was very much a sincere case of confusion on my end, and I take responsibility for that. So I appreciate you all taking the time for your consideration.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Mr. Spinks. Any other further discussion? Mr. Adler, it felt like you were close to making a motion earlier.
How about not close? I motion that we approve her application to proceed forward with her licensure.
I've heard the motion.
I'll second that.
And seconded by Dr. Becker. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed, say no.
And this is with Mr. Spink's
Yeah, got it.
cautionary tale, by the way.
Yeah.
It's approval, but remember Mr. Spink said that because it's
Yeah.
clearly valid.
Dr. Singh, you're on mute.
I want to register my vote as no.
Okay.
This is not such a mistake that at this level of education anybody can make.
The ayes do have it. The motion does carry. Thank you, Dr. Singh, for your statement there.
Yes.
All right. Moving on. Move over to Dawn Nelson, OSSP.
Okay, give me 1 second here.
Give everybody a chance to pull up their information. Your materials. Mr. Adler, did you work on this one too? No, okay. Essentially, just laying this out here, essentially, we have somebody who I believe is essentially licensed in California with a school of psychology credential coming to Texas. There's a question, I think, about the degree that we have to make a call on. Is Don Nelson here today? Oh, right, I see.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, perfect. Would you like to address the board and tell us some details about this?
Yes, and thank you for your time and consideration today.
Of course.
I understand the denial criteria, yet I respectfully submit just kind of the logistics of what happened to the program, as well as my years of experience and developed expertise for your review. And just kind of going historically, in 92, I attained a Master's of Education in Counseling Education at Westchester in Pennsylvania. In 1995, I met the admission criteria for the California State program, as I had the master's degree with a school counselor credential. In 1996, I graduated from the school psychology program. Concerning the program and its accreditation, I submitted a letter by Dr. Dudley Wiest, who was the coordinator of the school psychology program and co-writer of the program documents for accreditation. As Dr. Wiest indicated, the courses were developed and followed NASP accreditation guidelines, originally with a 2-year program in school counseling and then a 2-year add-on for school psychology. So students, we attended year-round, and our overall credits were beyond the minimum requirements at that time. And the program subsequently became nationally accredited by KCREP and NASP. Since 1996, I have practiced in public schools as a school psychologist until 2020, when I moved to Texas with my family. I have served students and families in each level, from preschool to adult transition, with specialized training in autism, mental health, ED, ERMS assessment, manifestation, determinations, behavioral analysis, crisis response, legally defensible evaluations, and IEP documentation. During the last 6 years of my practice, I focused on the most at-risk students. As the school psychologist on special assignment, I assessed and case managed students whose mental health and behavior warranted placement at non-public schools and residential treatment centers in state and out of state, including Texas. With the most high risk and complexity, most cases were legal, as students were represented by attorneys and/or advocates. My assessment reports were scrutinized and vetted by attorneys and defended successfully, before hearing officers and presented to juvenile court judges. Given the level of experience and expertise needed to represent the district in these high-profile cases, I gained acute skill in outcome-based research and practice on assessment, eligibility, interventions, goals, services, and analysis of case history. My work with high-risk students continued at the Orange County Department of Education, in the county's emergency shelter, and the Department of Probation and Correction, and as such, with court-assigned legal representation. I request the board please consider my acquired knowledge, specialized training, and experience of 24 years of practice to warrant the equivalency of the LSSP program requirements. And my hope is that I continue the privilege of serving students and families. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nelson. Before we let Ms. Nelson go, is there any questions from the board? Are there any questions from the board?
I have one.
Yes,
Hi,
sir.
Ms. Nelson. Is this a matter, so you're clearly qualified. I don't think there's any doubt, and it's a matter of different states, right? And, and when you move to Texas, it's a matter of you being able to do what you're trying to do. Is that would that be accurate?
Yes.
And in terms of employment, I assume, and in terms of livelihood, would you say?
Yes.
Would you say that?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that it's just been my life work. And so it was because of my husband's work that we moved to Texas. And because if you look on my resume, I do not come with a teaching background. I am not able to be an educational diagnostician. And it's really kind of the mental health component of my work that that I really I just feel like that's my work, and that's just kind of my skill set. So thank you. Yes, sir.
Dr. Cartwright.
So what exactly is in California, what exactly is the pupil personnel services credential? Can you explain that and kind of how that would translate to, I guess, the LSSP here in Texas, and what that actual credentialing is in California?
Good question. Because I received my counseling credential in Pennsylvania and then had reciprocity to Texas. Okay. So in California, the PPS or Pupil Personnel Service Credential it would be under the California Education Association or the credentialing system. So it's not separate as here in Texas. So in California, school counselors, school psychologists are under the PPS credentialing system. Was that clear, or was I fragmented in response?
I think so. Yeah, it's just another one of those like handshake situations where does it actually translate over into what the credentialing is for the LSSP in Texas? I think is one of is the main issue that we have to consider.
Right. When I'm so sorry. When I look at the qualifications for the educational diagnostician under TEA versus kind of what the parameters are for the LSSP, I would say that the PPS credential in California lines up more accurately with the LSSP, but it's a different system. So in terms of how the LSSP is designed here in Texas.
Patrick,
So it was, go
Oh,
ahead,
sorry.
sorry.
No, I was gonna say, Patrick, do you have something to add here?
Yeah, I was just gonna try to point out what the hang up is with this particular issue is. So in the LSSP licensing rule 463(9)D specifically says that for the graduate degree for that license, it has to be titled in psychology. And so the issue is her degree that's being used is titled in counseling, not psychology. So that's where I think staff had the big holdup. I believe she took other courses at California State University, and those may have been used for her credentialing in California. The problem is she did never get, as far as I understand, a degree conferred from California State University that was in psychology. One of the things I will say is we are adopting changes to the LSSP rule, and that's actually coming up to BHEC at the next BHEC meeting. And there is something where it talks about if you have a certificate program, like if you had a degree in counseling and you went to a certificate program and got whatever necessary courses you needed to fill in the gaps to get it, that would potentially be a way for a fix in the future, but that would actually be a certificate program in psychology. And I don't know if she necessarily doesn't have a certificate, I guess, but it's just to point out this is a problem that maybe has a solution for some people down the road.
So the
What
other thing,
about,
So
I
may
was
I,
gonna say, what about LPC? Would she meet criteria for an LPC?
no,
here,
I
Daryl,
haven't evaluated it for LPC, so I honestly don't know.
It is
I mean,
an alternate.
well, I doubt it. I doubt she's gonna qualify for the LPC because it would have to be a counseling related degree. And then
Right.
she's gonna have to meet a lot of specific coursework requirement. This is part of the problem whenever you have a lot of specific coursework. It tends to weed out a lot of people that might otherwise be eligible. Just to be clear on that LSSP certificate rule, I don't think that's going up to council yet on the 31st. I think that has to come back to the board, to this board, then y'all will have to assess whether you want to then recommend it on up. This is kind of the poster child for that type of a solution, though. I mean, the poster case for that kind of solution. The one drawback to that solution is you got to have a school that has that certificate program in place. In which case our rule is ahead of the schools on this. Basically, I think, well, I'm getting off topic. We'll get into that when the rule gets up here.
I think also, Daryl, correct me if I'm wrong, the rule or the statute that I asked you to track down about this gives leeway to the degree and coursework on the LSSP, whereas in other parts of statute for like the LP, it does not. So the
Correct.
point is that the law, not just the rule, the law treats this with a little bit more elasticity than the LP license. And so I think is that right?
You're absolutely correct. The LPs are very there's a single route. You got to have a psych degree.
Period.
This just says an appropriate graduate degree, or a graduate degree with specific requirements, which are set by y'all.
And the point is that her educational and experience has been sufficient for California.
Correct. It just
Already.
doesn't meet the specificity of the rule that this body has adopted and said, this is the standard for Texas.
Right.
Board, may I speak?
Please go ahead.
I was just to clarify, Dr. Hyde, in California, I am assigned a credential in school psychology. It may be under the umbrella of a PPS, but it is separate and distinct to school counseling. So,
That's a good distinction. Thank you.
thank you.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the
So-
confusion just comes in that the degree was in counseling or was in school counseling, which school counseling is even different than LPC, even if an LPC style of counseling or that. So I think that's where a lot of the confusion comes in, and again, how it handshakes over, I think is really the discussion. But I appreciate all the clarification.
So to get really concrete, in the pathway to get a seemingly very qualified individual licensed to be able to practice in our state, it sounds like the work that we're already doing for remediation and cross abilities in the LSSP is actually the directed pathway to solve this issue, and the only one legally that we would actually have here. Is that the summation of this so far?
So I'll let the attorneys correct me. We can approve this or not approve this. The point is that we've already recognized that this is a problem, and we're working on a more rule-based, elegant solution for everybody so that we don't have to call these, balls and strikes, one by one. So it's within it's our prerogative to approve this, I think, under the law, and I think within our rules.
It does seem like a whole lot of experience and education that would go to waste, especially in Texas, which, it's needed,
Yeah, I think the rules are there to make sure that we have people who are qualified. And so when somebody, when you're talking about different states and different credentials, there are times like this where you have something that doesn't quite fit the box. But I don't see how this applicant is not immensely qualified to get to work in this field.
And I 100% agree that she's more than qualified. I think like what part of the problem is just the slippery slope effect of what happens if now like people that are not as qualified but can make the same argument, but then we could have like a pool of unqualified applicants that could make the same argument in a similar situation from a similar state. I think that's sort of the issue that we have to mull out or decide. I think we're making strides as a board to help with this remediation, but I think that's kind of the issue that we have to.
well, Dr. Cartwright, if they were qualified, they're
I'm
unqualified.
not trying to slow us down, but the whole point of writing the remediation language and law was we were specifically told that we could not do what we were being asked to do under our legal confines previously. So we had to write that language. So I just want to be careful that we are not acting outside the purview of what we can do legally.
Are you talking about the psychologist that we were?
Anyone. I mean, we have previously approved things that I don't think we had the power to do.
Yeah.
And I don't want to get in the habit of doing that because we think that someone is qualified, because we're going to come up against someone who is not qualified, who makes the same argument to us. So
I think the difference here in the distinctions that why I had Daryl pull the law on this, the actual code, is that the law treats LSSPs differently than LPs. And this is the statute gives more elasticity in the requirements than it does for LPs. And that's what we're looking at here.
I have a comment. In the past, I'm one of those people who goes by the book and by the rule. And the rules were bent for some individuals, and the majority of the board supported that on the basis that we're doing it case by case basis. And if we're going to make decisions on case-by-case basis, then we should not think of what's going to happen in the future and this and that. We do have precedents of making decisions on case-by-case basis. And this professional is qualified if she has had experience working, in the other state with similar, with that work that she'll be doing here. I have no objection of approving her request.
Mr. Adler?
Yeah, I just want to, a couple things. Dr. Cartwright, Dr. Becker, you mentioned if they're unqualified and, they can, the whole point of this argument is she is qualified, and that's why we feel compelled to do it. And if they're not qualified, even though they think a precedent's been set, well, they're not qualified. So I'm less concerned about that because that's the whole basis of why I would lean towards approving this. Because she's qualified and they're not qualified, then we wouldn't approve them. And I think that would be pretty clear. And another point is like, what is a person like Ms. Nelson supposed to do? I mean, when she comes from another state, it's not her fault that apples and oranges, I think it's our responsibility to examine if there is some, if she's qualified and if we can find a way to get her license, because through no fault of her own, it's a issue that she has nothing to do with, but yet, title or not, or the word and the degree, like these situations where she moved because of her husband. I mean, you have to think about like, what makes sense here? What is, and I think the ultimate, if she's qualified, then she should be approved because, what is she supposed to do? This is her life's work.
May
And
I say
because it's a difference in, there's no standard, and that's nothing to do with her. But it's a matter of having a job or not having a job.
Any other
Yeah, I-
further discussion from the, Ms. Nelson, hang on just a second. Any other further discussion from the board?
Yes, I have a comment. I am moved by her particular situation and her predicament. You're absolutely right. This is a very difficult situation to find yourself in. And so, but I think also there are some things to consider. One of them is, do we as a body adapt to each particular situation that a particular applicant comes and presents before us, their personal situation? Or do we ask applicants to adapt to the rules set forth by the board? I think, I think my hat goes off to a lot of her experience that she has. She has a wide, array of, experience that she can offer Texas. And it is her life's work. I certainly understand that. But, becoming a mental health professional comes from a foundation, an educational foundation. It comes from experience and doing things under the supervisory experience, and then, testing. I think we can't ignore that there is fundamentally a difference between psychology and counseling. It is a different, there's a lot of crossover, but it is a different discipline. That's why there's different programs. And I wonder if maybe we can consider, and I don't know if we have the authority, I think we can, but you'll correct me if I'm wrong, is to look at those courses and audit those courses that can be applied towards her meeting the standard. And then what are the courses that she would take or would be looking at taking to fill in the gaps? Just my opinion.
I agree with
Can
you.
anybody, are you all able to hear me at all?
Yes, we can hear you, Mr.
Are you
Zagreus.
able to hear me? I apologize for interrupting. I've had a hard time getting things going here today, and I'm able to talk in the nick of time. I don't know if you all are better off by me not talking, of course, but I would say that I am a product of the same kind of background of this lady. I got an education degree, and I went ahead and got more psychology hours so that my degree could be considered psychological in nature. As a result of that, I was able to sit for the exam, But I worked as a master's level LPA and a master's level counselor and a master's level lots of things before I was ever certified. It's quite obvious that this lady is fully above qualified, and I think that she needs to have her license.
I was going to say, I think I was looking at the prefixes, and I think that that's something that the board needs to consider, because a number of her courses were in counseling. They were not in psychology. So I don't know if this is something that the board would want to put on the agenda and look at more closely, and look at the course content of persons that are applying for a license, so that we can determine if they actually have had the education experience for the credential they're applying for.
I have to
Yeah.
speak.
Go ahead,
I
sorry.
want to speak up again and say, this doesn't jive well with me, because we have made, we have approved requests for individuals before that were in similar situations, and overlooked all these specifics that we're looking at right now. And case was made that they were qualified for the job. And this individual has a lot of experience, and what she'll be doing here will be very similar to what she was doing over there in other states. And I don't think that we need to start getting constringent now with today, unless you're gonna start following the rules by the I think she's qualified, and she, with the need that we have right now for the school psychologists, the need we have in our state right now or nationwide, I think we should allow her to prevail.
I think just there's 2 points though that I just want to make. One is kind of, again, on a case-by-case basis, where do we draw the line? And how many additional cases will this bring up to the board? And how much will that burden staff as well? And I know that's not necessarily what we need to consider as a board, but it could potentially open floodgates, quite a bit. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I'm presenting the thought or the comment. And then, secondly, it just becomes, where is the line drawn? We have the rules in place, and we have remediation built in for the future. Then, again, where would that line be drawn on a case-by-case basis? Because anyone, they've worked for 10 years in the schools as a school psychologist in another state, they could say they're qualified for sure. And again, all respect to Ms. Nelson, I think she is more than qualified. So again, those are the thoughts that I have about it. I think for the more of the discussion.
I think I would also like us to look at the big picture here, this is the way the world is. I know we all know, like, not you're going to have a situation like that is not going to come before you, that is neat and box, but it's still our responsibility to give it every single, consideration that we can, because based on a different language used in another state. And it's a matter of keeping in mind, like, shortage in Texas, it goes beyond that. It goes beyond, we're serving people in Texas, and are they a danger, and, case by case basis. And if there's a lot of qualified people out there that are in some situations that, it opens the floodgates, I'd be happy to evaluate them if they're qualified, and deny them if they're not qualified. That's fine. That's fine. I mean, like, maybe, that, but I think, expecting that somebody coming from another state, her husband moved here because of his work. I mean, what is she supposed to do? I mean, like, and we have to do everything we can. And then ultimately, if there's a huge gap, or there's a huge thing, she's not meeting, then that's easy, but it's the big picture here. I mean, like, I just feel like we can't penalize her because California operates a different way or whatever, or the counseling, there's, this LSSP is the best fit, it seems like, for her to get back to work and use all that stuff, I mean, otherwise it's just a waste for the people of Texas.
I think we're kind of circling back to another situation that we dealt with about a year ago, and it got a lot of attention from some of the legislators. And so I think we need to actually place this on the agenda for the board again, John, if you're willing to do that, because I think we need to set standards and we need to decide how we're going to make determinations. Because I think when we look at one individual, it's just not the fair way to approach that. I think she's overly qualified. I don't think anybody can deny that she's overly qualified. But how do we go forward with this? And with someone who feels that they're overly qualified and the board feels differently?
Well, thank you, Dr. Calhoun. We are, this is, obviously we have rulemaking going through on this right now to address this exact issue. And we'll continue to continue. You have my support in terms of putting things like this on the agenda to make situations like this not an issue. Any other further discussion?
I just want to add one thing. I'm fine with scrutinizing this further. Like, I'm not saying like we prove her today, but I'm fine with going over it, fine tooth comb and seeing, like, that's totally appropriate, I would say, like, let's take some more time, I just want us to make sure we give her every option. And we need to take some time to go through it and to make sure, like coursework and auditing, hey, at least the door is open.
I think I come back to, I want to make sure that where we're at is we actually have the pathway to get Ms. Nelson from point A to point B, which is the legislation that we're already working on. I think what we don't want to do is get in this cycle of putting it off and putting it off and putting it off, which we've had previously. So I think the question is, how close are we to that solution? And is that going to be viable for Ms. Nelson's case? Because if it's going to be another year, I don't know that that's fair to do that. But if we're 3 months from this, do we put those two things there together? And maybe that's a question for our lawyers, is where are we in the timeline of adopting that legislation? And does that make it viable for Ms. Nelson's case?
The change that y'all have proposed that would allow the certificate, a person with a non-psych degree to seek a certificate, that's going to be, I suspect, unless y'all just change your mind or derail it or something like that, I suspect it'll be adopted within, I don't know, 6 months. The problem with it is I don't know that there are any programs out there that exist right now that will take a non-psych degree holder and then train them up and give them a certificate in school psych. Like the Texas Tech program that we kind of modeled that rule after, you already have to have a psychology degree. It may not be in school psych. It could be an experimental psych, and they will train you up.
It's not really a remediation piece where okay, got it.
The problem is our rule was stifling any kind of innovation. And so we have now busted that open and said, innovate, figure out a way to fix this. This lady's problem is she's
actually overqualified anyway by the rule.
Well, I mean, you've got a statute that says, hey, y'all have got complete discretion as to what you consider to be an acceptable degree. I mean, the legis gave y'all wide open discretion, but then you went in your rule and said, well, it has to be a psychology degree. So how do you get around that without changing that rule?
And one other thing too that's unfortunate in Texas, there's not a lot of school psychology programs, for one. And then secondly, to your point, Daryl, there's not a lot of ways that someone could go in and kind of, pick apples off the tree on which courses they need to fill that in, or to even be able to enroll to be able to do that. So it's a problem for sure. And I want to make that point as well.
I think that I don't know where we're going on this, but I think that it does highlight the fact we need to initiate some rulemaking for these circumstances. The other thing too, when I think about the rule that Daryl was talking about, that's geared to a kind of a different situation. It's not geared to this situation per se. I don't know if we've contemplated this situation, and this is a problem with as many people who are coming to Texas. How is somebody this qualified, like, hitting a wall on our rule?
Are you talking about, John, like she wouldn't actually need to go get the certificate to be qualified. It's almost like a check the box thing for her.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, I got you. I'm tracking. Yeah, what we need to do is take a look at that rule that says thou shalt have a psych degree, and that's the only thing that you can have.
Correct.
That's what needs to be looked at here.
Correct. And the reason we can do that is because the statute gives us that elasticity in the LSSP.
Correct.
And it doesn't give it, we don't have that wiggle room elsewhere.
You don't have it for the LP. I think you've got quite a bit of wiggle room for the LPA, but not for the LP. It's very strict
to me, and that's clear, because if the ledge said thou shalt have a psychology degree, they would have made it the same for all of them, and they didn't. So can we table this for the moment, and then rather than voting anything down, and leave it pending?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
What I'm not sure about is how long her app is valid. Diane, do we know how long her app will remain valid?
Dan, you're on mute. Ms. Moore, you're on mute.
These windows are crazy. Let me pull up the app and see if it's on here.
How is this going to help us or her by tabling this?
Well, essentially, you've got to,
Okay.
to Dr. Becker's point earlier, making sure that we're not just plowing through our own rules.
Oh.
That would be one reason to table it. I mean, obviously, it's in our power to go ahead and approve it.
Well, we've done it before in very irregular situations, and I don't see how this is any different.
The floor is open for motions.
I think since we're not just making a rule here, we're making a motion for one particular individual, as several people have stated today, that really anything that we do opens the door or makes it applicable to other individuals that feel, or perhaps they really are, in a similar situation. And so it really opens the door for all of us to consider case by case. And in a lot of ways, why have rules that are so specific? With all due respect, I understand it's going, ways back. Number one, we just need to look at this just in a broader general sense. But more specific, it is the bachelor's degree. It is the fundamental degree that seems to be kind of a holdup. The degree and certification and all of that, and the experience and all of that is something that I think none of us disagree on. When you look at a psychology degree, it's certainly not for a bachelor's, but there are things that are going to not completely work, or not, it has to be a psychology degree. Those are different courses. But again, there's general courses as well that we need to kind of look at and say, well, if you really take this degree in psychology, which courses meet this criteria and which do not, and how do we go back and see if we can fill in those blanks by maybe taking a few courses. Obviously, if it's way too many courses, that's going to be a concern, and it's not really helpful to anybody. But maybe we can kind of create some rules when we look at this in a broader sense about, when is it viable and when is it just not viable, and you might as well start from scratch.
I do wonder, you bring up a really good point, Dr. Lambden, is I do wonder, having written this role with Mr. Adler, is I wonder if we need to look at what we've written on the rules committee and with some guidance from Daryl and Patrick, this is making me think about whether I hate to put it like this, but whether there needs to be some kind of, not a grandfather clause, but something that actually addresses what happens when someone comes from another state where they've been practicing in something that is not exactly how it's written out in our state. I mean, Ms. Nelson is a great example of someone who has been functioning as a school psychologist as it's defined in another state, not by our statutes.
I just had a stakeholder text me and they've got a pretty good, I don't want to say actually, that sounds bad, but they had a pretty good idea. They asked me about if we could treat this more like, create something more like reciprocity. Now, it wouldn't be reciprocity, but we could do something like licensure by endorsement for the LSSP because y'all have such broad authority. Like what Dr. Becker's saying, you could basically say, look, if you're licensed, credentialed, or registered in another jurisdiction to practice school psych, then we're going to treat whatever degree you have as meeting the requirements for Texas. Now, we still have to make sure they would have to meet some specific statutory coursework requirement. I can't get away from that. That's probably going to be, I think they can even fix that. Patrick, can they Frankenstein that if that was a problem?
Under the rule, yeah, they can, if they didn't have it under their first degree, they can go back and get up to 12 credits, I think. Semester.
Okay. So
I mean, I feel like there's got to be a way to write this as an end around for someone
Yeah.
as qualified as Ms. Nelson.
Yeah.
You know
I
what
think a
mean?
good distinction could be like, how long, have they already completed their education? Are they like, far removed from education? Are they already licensed in another state versus if somebody is like still actively like in a program or just graduated, but it's more of like, do you have like is it like,
I mean, this is
have
someone
you
with
ever-
20
yeah.
years of practice in
Right.
another state. Nobody,
Right.
I don't think this board is questioning her qualifications. It's questioning
Right.
how she pigeonholes into our licensing standards and
Right.
trying not to get around our licensing standards, which just means that we're struggling to put a square peg in a round hole. And that's our challenge. I feel like not hers. And I'm trying to figure out how we get her to practice in our state without undoing our licensing practices.
Dr. Becker,
and
you
it
took the
feels
words out of
like,
my mouth.
I mean, that feels like something we should be able to
Yes.
get through,
Yes,
right?
agreed.
And I think that's where we're all kind of going in circles about, is that it feels like we should be able to pave the way to get qualified applicants practicing.
It feels like there's broad consensus on the goal here of writing a rule to address this. We have some discretion here, and I do think that people who watch what we do, I understand the slippery slope concerns. There is no matter, I'm just going to say for a second, assume we approved this. Anybody who looks at what we're doing right now, I think would understand why, and that it wasn't just, willy-nilly, and that we're going to fix this and put some hard lines on how we deal with this in the future. I'm not that worried in this case about the slippery slope, because I think there's broad consensus on her qualifications. Yes, Dr. Lambden?
Yes, if I may say, I think that we could have, and Dr. Becker, you bring up a really good point. I think that we need to, and it's very doable, I think, to address this for this particular individual, but also address it in a broader sense, and that we can, if there is a rule or something already formally written or adopted, that we can say individuals that don't quite meet the path, don't quite meet, our current rules, that we would like to encourage individuals, to that are in good standing with their licensing board, that want to come over and based on X amount of experience to do the things that in Texas that they're already successfully doing in their state of residence, at the current time, that they can come over and do these things right up until a certain point in time. after that point, then you must meet these, and that's where we come in and we tweak what's currently in place. And if it's too narrow, then we need to look at it and give somebody a formula, a pathway to say, if you have, you know, X or these degrees, then this is the coursework that you need in order to create a bridge for these individuals. I would be very much in favor of something like that.
I think
100% agree with that.
Okay, I think what I can assure you guys to the board is that the rules committee is going to put something together to address this, regardless of what happens here right now. This illustrates something we can fix. All right.
So her application is expired, right? Like what, you know, for her, you know, Ms. Nelson, I think we need to discuss like, do we have to act now, or is it now or never? Regarding the expired application.
Patrick, Daryl.
Daryl, I would think we would want to make a decision on yes or no on it, right? Because it's beyond the 90 days.
Hold on, guys. I'm getting some kind of an alert right now from DPS. Stand by just a second here. Okay, we're okay.
Okay.
State your question again, John.
Sorry, the question was, Herman was asking about
her expired application.
Expired application. What are our options?
Well, I mean, it's expired. She appealed. I don't know that, I just don't see that you have any wiggle room right now under your own rule. I think you just have to deny the appeal. It doesn't, we don't report that to NPDB or anything like that. It doesn't preclude her from coming back, but she would need to wait until we get the rule fixed so that it would allow her then to come in under any changes. To me, that's the only option I can see under the rule.
So it's not we have to act today, we have to vote today, or it's.
Well, I mean, if she's technically appealed the staff denial to y'all, so I don't think you can just ignore it. You got to either approve her or deny it.
So you do have to make a decision.
Yeah. Now, I mean, if she still had like time left on the application, then you could table it. And if we then had time to fix the rule, you know, we could, but the problem is the application's already expired.
Yeah.
She's appealed it. It's an up or down type thing.
So we can make an up or down decision on this application today. Regardless of that decision, whether approved or denied, this is obviously something we need to work on in rules. So
right.
I think Dr. Lambden, maybe Dr. Calhoun was asking about that too. Assurances to you and to the rest of the board, you will see a rule coming out of the rules committee on this. In the meantime, it sounds like we need to make a decision.
Now, I will add one other thing, I'm going to play devil's advocate because I've said, you know, I told you what I thought the end result had to be, but if you approved it, it's like nobody can object to it either. So it's not like
it is our prerogative to approve it.
It is. I mean, you're just kind of running directly into your own rule there.
The point, I'll just say this and for my closing on this. We are in the board position to make decisions in extraordinary circumstances, to do the right thing. So I think that no matter where y'all's minds are on this, you know, either for or against, there are definitely, there's not a wrong vote on this one, I don't think. I think it's just how each of us approach it. So that's why we're in this position now.
I would like to move that we approve it.
You guys
I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there further discussion to approve?
Yes, I have just a comment, you know, again, I'm stating that I really feel for Ms. Nelson in her particular situation. And I understand also that we do have the ability to approve this. We do have the authority as a body. My concern, though, is that, again, I think it's been stated before, not just by myself, we would be looking at really kind of opening the door for other individuals to bring up their own, situation, particular situation, or, kind of a similar assessment or evaluation on our part. And, if we've approved this one, I think it would be very difficult to deny subsequent applications that come forth based on our approval of this one. And I do understand, and I do feel for, Ms. Nelson and her particular situation through no fault of her own. I strongly feel we need to fix this. And, there's no time pressure on our part, just in terms of the application having been expired on the 20th of November of last year. I do understand there is pressure on our part in order to help Ms. Nelson to be able to be qualified in our state sooner rather than later. Just my thought. I don't think I can vote for this today. And, I say that with a heavy heart, but that's where my head's coming from.
Further discussion? Mr. Zagouris?
You're on mute.
Mr. Zagouris, you're on mute. Still on mute, Mr. Zagouris. There we go.
Okay, sorry. Several of us today have used the word overqualified for this applicant. And for the life of me, why am I going to be denying a license to somebody who we say is overqualified? And with regards to opening up the gate, we take each one of these cases individually. Maybe the next person who applies, we wouldn't have that label of overqualified. And so the credentialing agencies, APA, and all the different people that go into saying what it is to be a psychologist or a school psychologist or whatever, those are the objective measures. The reason for this board is to apply the subjectivity that is required of individual human beings.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
One last thing, the board is not a machine. It doesn't act like a machine. It's supposed to, consider other factors than, input, output, and kind of like, because if all we're looking at is if they met the strictest, word for word, then, why are we here, but the human element is needed in some situations, such as this one.
I think for me, it's also about closing the loop. And so I happen to agree with Dr. Lambden, but at the same time, I think where I'm leaning towards.
Hang on just a second. I think we've got feedback. There we go. Try again.
Okay. I think where I'm leaning towards voting for this is the idea that we're going to change the rule. And we're going to push that rule forward because it brought this to light. And so I think in the expediency of not drawing this out like we have previously, I would lean towards doing what's right for the person and then closing the loop on the rule on the backside of it.
Thank you, Dr. Becker. Any further discussion?
Yes, sorry, Mr. Lamowitz. I know you want to kind of, wrap this up. Just real quickly. I know we can't give assurance, in terms of when this would be at least formally written so that it could go, and follow the procedure so that it could be adopted within, all the appropriate channels that we have. Any thoughts about when we would have this rule modified or amended in some way? In other words,
Yeah, I'll answer that question. I fully would anticipate that you'll have something to look at by the next meeting. There's no reason why the rules committee can't and staff can't get something cooking by the next meeting.
We will.
The
Okay.
ledge has put us on notice, and I'm glad that we've started on this literally, last summer. we're full steam ahead on identifying and streamlining anything like this that's a snag in our licensing process. That is what the ledge who's in session right now has directed all of us at BHEC to do, not just the psychology board. So I ain't wasting any time on getting a rule in front of the board to fix problems like this.
Okay, then if that's the case, and we have assurance, because I think as a body, we are tasked with, helping to streamline and facilitate qualified people to come to our state and to continue to be licensed and work in our state. But also, we are also tasked, I know, with protecting the public. That is hugely important. So if that is the case, then I would be willing to change my vote on this particular case.
Very good.
Me as well.
All right. Any other further discussion? Hearing none. It's been moved and seconded to approve the application. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, say no. Thank you. I want to just thank the board. Thank you, Ms. Nelson. Ms. Nelson, are you up in Collin? I don't know if she can still come off mute. Are you up in Collin County?
Yes, sir, I am.
All right. So I used to live in Collin County and I left because there was too much growth because I didn't like,
Okay.
and I got to a little bit more elbow room. So I'm glad that you're out there. People of Collin County need you. There's just more of y'all coming every day from California out there. So welcome. We're glad you're here and thank you for what you do.
Well, and if I can just address the board, thank you. And I am greatly humbled and thankful for each of you and the ensuing discussion. Just as it is so true that I'm a round peg in a square hole. And so I appreciate the flexibility and the willingness of the board to move forward on approving my application and just in the future work. So thank you all.
Thank
Hey,
you very
Ms. Nelson,
Yes, sir.
who's better, Texas or California?
Texas.
That better be your answer.
I know,
Okay.
but I do like Penn State too. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is everybody good to keep going or do we need 5 minutes? We've been going for
Let's
now.
take, can we get 5 minutes?
Yeah, let's take 5 minutes. Whatever your clock says, I'm gonna come back. If we've got a quorum in 5 minutes, I'm gonna continue. So let's keep it prompt and see you back in 5 minutes. All right, the time is 11:36 on January the 12th, 2023, and then Texas State Board of Examiners of Psychologists is back in session. All right, moving on to 7A little I, denial appeal, Carla Sharp. So this is a psychology degree, correct? I mean, a psychology, an LP license, correct? Am I reading that right?
Yes, apparently she had been provisional for quite some time and that expired. And it's a matter of international degree and this wasn't given at the application committee level, but from my reading, not meeting criteria for the licensed psychologist.
So Dr. Sharp is a PhD from Cambridge. Is Dr. Sharp here today?
Yes.
Daryl, did you want Monica to join us to help answer some questions as well?
She's out in the attendee list. If we need her, we can bump her up.
Okay.
Okay. I guess,
Patrick, can you just kind of lay it out what the issue is?
I think the elevator speech quickly on this is that she is potentially missing the hours of supervised experience in her internship and then in her postdoc. And I believe this came to the board previously, but this was years ago. And so there's a review in the file that was done, I want to say is almost, I'm gonna get the date wrong, but probably like 2010, 2009, where they reviewed it and there was some missing supervised experience. And so she was provisional for a while. And then now that the provisionals are expiring, she's reapplied. And so I don't know that one of the other problems that came up is a lot of the supervisors she previously had, because she was educated out of the country with different universities. A lot of the supervisors she had that provided her experience have since deceased. So that also causes a wrinkle to document the different supervisor experience. But I think the total number of hours don't equal the 1750 internship, 1750 postdoc, which is what staff was looking for.
And Monica has done a pretty good job of outlining the deficiencies. If you look on page 2 of the meeting materials on Dr. Sharp, page 2 of the PDF, and then page 2 of Monica's memo. At the bottom of that page, she outlines all the deficiencies and problems.
And Dr. Flynn is her attorney. We might want to promote him as well.
Yeah, I would be interested to give them an opportunity to lay it out for us.
Yeah, we can't talk to her without him.
Oh, that's right. Is he not here?
No,
Yeah.
I see him.
Yeah, he's here.
Okay, great. If they would like to, they don't have to. I want to be clear about that, just to give them that opportunity.
Oh, I bet Dr. Flynn will want to talk.
I just have to not, I don't want to cajole anybody.
Yes, I am here. Can you all hear me?
Yes, sir.
Dr. Sharp is also here
Mhm.
and she is prepared to speak. The issue here is largely a misunderstanding between Dr. Sharp's educational experiences background and the board's understanding of that involves the fact that she, and I think she failed to display clearly in her application that she has clinical experience as a graduate student and as a postdoc treating clinical clients, and that did not come through clearly on her application, at least in large part because we're dealing with licensure and educational issues in South Africa and in England, which is even farther away than California, by the way. I don't want to get that started. Let us not get that started again. But she does have significant clinical experience treating clients under the supervision of licensed psychologists in England, as well as in South Africa. And then also at the board's request, subsequently, Dr. Sharp got additional supervision since 2009 with a licensed Texas psychologist. One of the issues that was addressed, and this kind of came up in an earlier thing, she received her degree in England at Cambridge, from Cambridge, her doctoral degree, and she finished the work and completed the degree, if I remember correctly, in April of a given year. I don't remember which year, but she finished then. However, in order to include her family with the graduation exercise and being able to walk the stage and celebrate with her family, she delayed the actual walking of the stage, the actual conferral of the degree. She had finished the degree and was then pushed over into doing postdoctoral work. But the way the board read that, the way the application read that, is that she didn't, that much of her experience, that experience between April and December when she graduated, when she actually walked the stage, that 6 or 8 months, 7 months was not counted as part of her postdoctoral year. And the question here is whether, since she finished her degree, but she simply chose not to walk the stage. The only thing that had not happened was that she had not gone through the actual graduation ceremony, but all the accoutrements were done, all the training was done, all the classes were finished, and she was awarded the degree, but she had not walked the stage until December because she wanted her family to be there. They have different customs in England in terms of allowing people to delay walking the stage. I know when I graduated, it was either walk next week or you don't get to, Dr. Flynn. You're going to have to go without graduating. I had graduated, walking the stage was optional. And in the same sense, she had graduated and walking, she was able to delay the actual walking the stage process. So she has sufficient postdoctoral experience under supervision of licensed psychologists in England, as well as subsequent postdoctoral experience here in the United States. But I think the application and Dr. Sharp's the forms that Dr. Sharp filled out failed to display adequately that she does have sufficient postdoctoral hours. She has sufficient predoctoral and supervision under licensed psychologists. That was one of the questions that Ms. Fierro had, is that the psychologists were in fact licensed. The experience she had was in fact clinical, working with clinical clients in the clinics, in various clinics and hospitals in England, earlier in South Africa. So Dr. Sharp is here and available to answer questions of the board. But she has been a psychologist for years, trying to get a license. She passed the EPPP, she passed the jurisprudence. She actually sat for, some of you are old enough to remember when we had to sit for oral exams that got done away with, and Dr. Sharp finished and passed the oral exams. The only question now is the question of whether her clinical experience under supervision is adequate, and Dr. Sharp certainly believes that it was adequate, well-supervised, licensed psychologists treating clinical clients for at least as many hours as are required by the board's rules. I'm going to stop talking now. I think I'm beginning to repeat myself. Smile if you agree.
Thank you, Dr. Flynn. I guess what you said, something that highlights what I'm struggling with, is you said that her application fails to show that she comported with the rules. And I appreciate what you're saying. I have no reason to necessarily doubt you. But as a board, we have to look at the application to make a decision. And I think you're right. The application does not, there's a lot that I'm looking at here that does not comport with the with our rules and requirements for it. That's what I'm struggling with.
If I may, this is Dr. Sharp. I'm really grateful for the board's time and consideration of this case. I think Dr. Flynn did a good job of representing the issues. I just wanted to explain why I think in the forms there were three issues on which the original application was denied after I passed the EPPP jurisprudence in the oral. The first one was based on the fact that the one-year internship that I did was part of my master's degree in South Africa in clinical psychology. The master's degree in clinical psychology in South Africa is the terminal degree. So to become a licensed clinical psychologist in South Africa, you just do the master's. And so the one-year full-time internship that I did under supervised supervision, clinical supervision, was a part of my master's degree. And so at the time of, I don't think that my application failed to it's just that the board requires the internship to be part of the PhD degree and not the master's degree. The argument that I would like the board to consider is that even though it's part of the master's degree, I didn't have a choice. That was when the internship took place. And I did it as part of the terminal degree in South Africa, which is and I did the full-time supervised experience, pre-doctoral one-year full-time experience, even though it was part of the master's degree and not the doctoral degree. I then went on to do the doctoral degree between 1997 and 2000. This was a research PhD in psychology at the University of Cambridge. I wanted to be licensed as a clinical psychologist because I did the clinical psychology degree in South Africa. I've always seen myself as a scientist practitioner, even though I'm full professor at University of Houston in the clinical psychology program right now. I wanted to continue to see patients. And so in England, after my research PhD, I wanted to get licensed based on my credentials. The British licensure board determined that I needed to do more clinical experience, which was fair because my PhD was a research PhD in psychology. I then went and did the 18 months that they required of me to do full-time clinical work. As Dr. Flynn said, unbeknownst to me, not knowing how it would work in Texas or that I even was going to live in Texas one day, I started my postdoc hours in March of 2000. My degree was only conferred in December of 2000. But I actually had 18 months, which is more than the hours required by the Texas State Board of Examiners to do my postdoctoral hours. So I did those hours. I was then licensed, fully licensed in the UK to provide clinical services. I did a postdoc, a 3-year postdoc at University of Cambridge then, which was again a research postdoc, but I again worked clinically in a private practice to keep my clinical expertise and further hone it. Dr. Gillian Todd wrote a letter to the board to the effect of those supervised hours that she provided at the time. I then, came to Houston. I was at Baylor College of Medicine, employed as a psychologist. I was director of clinical training for the internship program at Baylor College of Medicine for 2 years. And I moved to Houston in 2009. I was the director of clinical training in the Houston clinical program from 2014 to 2020, when I was asked to be Associate Dean for Faculty and Research. So I've been engaged in clinical supervision of students for a long time. I didn't try and pursue the full licensure again because I am in an exempt agency where I don't need the license, the full license to do the work that I do. But I've been a supervisor. I run a clinic for adolescents, an assessment clinic. It was in the context of this assessment clinic that Dr. Jack Fletcher provided supervision experience for me when I opened the clinic. He's been doing this for many years. And he provided additional clinical assessment experience 2015 and 16. In order to get more hours that could count. So I would not actually explain or describe my situation in the way Dr. Flynn described it. I think my experience, when you put it all together, I put our program through accreditation with the Commission for Accreditation, so I understand what the credentials are for clinical psychologists. I think I have the credentials of the clinical psychologist. It was just done in a patchwork of experiences. It wasn't done in the way that it's usually done in the US, the 1 year that's part of the PhD, pre-doctoral, and then the 1 year that's done postdoctoral. It happened in a different way, which was out of my control, and so I'll stop there and answer any questions that folks may have.
If I can just summarize briefly, I think we have here a potato, tomato question that the goal of the board's rules, the application rules, is to make sure that there's plenty of clinical supervised experience, that people who are licensed have had training that is supervised by licensed professionals and have plenty of hours. In this case, Dr. Sharp has the hours and the clinical training, but it's not been called internship, and it's not been called practicum, and it's not been called necessarily pre-doctoral, postdoctoral. The question here is she has plenty of hours and plenty of supervision. We just didn't call it by that name in England and in South Africa. Enough said. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Flynn. All
Hey,
right.
Monica, I've elevated you up here to where you can talk. Can you unmute yourself?
Yes, sir.
Hey, did we look at why she wouldn't? Did we look at 46310E?
Yes, I looked at everything. Before I even issued an L, I run through every possible scenario where they have a license out of state or out of country. I looked, do they fall under the rules where they graduated prior to 2017? If there was a whole, an avenue, I tried to dig it up. I searched through over 300 pages of her professional file to look for things. I've done everything. In terms of like the supervision, the supervision that was done in the UK was not under a licensed psychologist. When she applied back in 2009, she stated that Dr. Adams was not actually a licensed psychologist. He was a professor at the time and he got some kind of honorary title or honorary something or other, but he was not actually licensed. That's why the 2009 board and my decision came up to that supervision does not meet. The only eligible hours that I have are the 625 hours that were done in 2015 and 2017. I can't use in the formal internship because it's part of the master's. And any of the other postdoc that was done from, I believe it was March of 2000 to.
Let me
until
stop
she
you right here
graduated,
for
she
just a
couldn't
second.
use.
Let me stop you right here. On the
Yes, sir.
master's degree from South Africa, is there a foreign degree evaluation on that?
UT did an evaluation and said that both the master's and the doctorate are equivalent to a US degree.
To a US doctoral degree?
The master's that she had is equivalent to a master's and the doctorate is equivalent to a doctor. Yes.
Oh, okay. So the South African master's degree is not equivalent to a doctorate here.
Correct.
Okay.
May I address the issue of Dr. Malcolm?
Hold on just a second, Dr. Sharp.
Sorry.
Okay, Monica, go ahead and finish. I interrupted you.
It's okay. So again, the same determination that the 2009 board made, I also made. So from December 10th of 2000 up until August 2001, we did fall short of that. And again, since the supervisor wasn't a licensed psychologist, none of that time can be used. So I have no formal internship and no postdoc hours that meet that criteria, just a supervision under Dr. Fletcher from 15 to 17 that I have able. The licenses that she had in South Africa and UK have been expired for 20 plus years, so I can't go into that avenue. I don't know where else to find hours. I did reach out to her prior to having legal representation to ask her if she had any other supervision that would possibly meet any of the roles. And that's the only thing I got was the 2015, 2017 experience.
I'm wondering if I could address the Dr. Malcolm Adams, because that is the piece that is causing my postdoc hours, it seems, not to be recognized. The Dr. Malcolm Adams filled out the verification form for the postdoctoral hours. He was a professor, he's deceased now, is a professor of clinical psychology at Norwich University. He's the DCT of overseeing the statement of equivalence that I did in order to get British licensing. But I was, as testified in my verification form, my day-to-day clinical supervision was done by Dr. Sinclair Loch, Dr. Sally Mortlock, and Dr. Peter Appleton. Their names were in my verification form, but it was the DCT who filled out the form, as it is often the case when the DCT fills it out. And Dr. Malcolm Adams himself was a professor. He's a licensed clinical psychologist, but his title was professor at University of Norwich. Again, it is translation issues that where I failed to translate British or South African ways of doing things into the American lexicon, if you will. So my direct and I have not tried to get in touch with Dr. Sally Mortlock or Dr. Loch or Dr. Appleton. I can certainly try, but it was the DCT who filled out the postdoctoral verification form for supervised hours, and that was Professor Malcolm Adams. He was a licensed clinical psychologist, but his title is professor because he's at the university, and that's how it works in the UK. You are a professor, you're not a doctor in the way. I'm a professor here, but I call myself Dr. Sharp. So his title in the UK was professor. So I feel it's a amalgam of strange lost in translation issues that has brought me to this point.
Thank you, Dr. Sharp. All right, board.
Mr. Belamowitz,
Yes.
I wonder if I might ask the applicant a question, Dr. Sharp.
Absolutely.
So I hope you can bear with me, Dr. Sharp. Thank you for being here today. I'm a little bit confused and I would like some clarification just for my own understanding. And hopefully this will also be of assistance to the rest of the board members and staff. So I understand you're training in 2 different places and I understand your move to the United States. But I think what I'm a little bit confused about is, and I understand you're wanting to work off of the research practitioner model. I think a lot of us, really kind of value that role. But what I'm confused about is, I thought I heard you say at one point, certainly, and maybe another point, and what the specific question I wanted to ask you is, how much of your supervisory hours was done by a clinical psychologist or a psychologist research as well that was not licensed?
All of my clinical training was supervised by a licensed clinical psychologist. So in my internship, it was Dr. Tessa Middleton and Dr. Hendrik Kotzier. They were both licensed clinical psychologists for my internship in South Africa. Dr. Mickey Gerber was the DCT who filled out my internship verification form. My postdoctoral supervision was also done by licensed psychologist Sinclair Loch. And the 3 people that I mentioned, the DCT was Malcolm Adams. So none of my supervised experience was done not by a clinical psychologist. They were all licensed clinical psychologists, and their names are in my verification material that I submitted way back when in 2007. When I applied for provisional licensure, you know how applicants have to fill out a readiness form to apply for. That was Dr. Thruster Bjorgensen, Dr. Mindy Stanley, and Dr. Lois Friedman, who are 3 licensed psychologists in the state of Texas, clinical psychologists who filled out my readiness form for applying for licensure. And so all of my experience has been I identify as a clinical psychologist, and that is why I'm in a clinical psychology program, and that's why I was director of clinical training for 6 years here at UH, but also at Baylor College of Medicine at the internship program.
Okay.
Hang
sorry.
on, Monica's got her hand up. Does Monica have something she needs to?
I just wanted to add too, because I provided the denial letter from the 2009 board, and they made recommendations on how the applicant could remediate, and they requested that she go back and get 2 years of additional experience. And from a footnote in Dr. Flynn's appeal stating that Dr. Sharp refused to complete that supervision that was requested by the board. So she's had time to get that supervision and provide it to us. And I don't see anything different than what the 09 board has found.
Thank you, Monica.
Okay. Just real quickly, I'm looking at that, that document here where it says deficiencies basis of denial, and it would be page 2, I suppose, of the documents that we were given as well for reference. And I do see that the hours of Dr. Fletcher were totaled 625, and the requirement was 1750. So even though all of those hours were from people that were qualified to render that supervision and could apply, that there is still a shortfall, as I understand it, of supervisory hours that are that would apply under the rules that this body has identified.
Monica, and then I'm going to come to you, Dr. Flynn. Monica, did you have something else?
If you want me to. So even if we say that Dr. Adams was licensed, the postdoc is still going to fall short because she can't count from prior to the conferral. So anything from December 10th on to August 2001 can be counted. Based on a rough estimate, that's about 1,500 hours. So we're still short on that without 0 hours from an internship.
Okay, thank you, Monica. Dr. Flynn.
No, I have nothing further.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Blamowitz.
Further discussion.
Hey, Monica, can you lower your hand so it doesn't look like you still have a, there you go.
Monica, raise your hand again if you have something else, okay?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Any further discussion, y'all?
I guess I just have a question for the board. I guess what I am asking for in an appeal is for my hours to be counted, and for an exception to be made to how the hours are counted. So for an exception to be made that the internship is acknowledged because it was part of a master's degree, so that can be acknowledged because I did the actual hours, and that the postdoctoral hours can be acknowledged, even though it started before my conferral of my degree, because I actually did the hours. That I guess it is, and I understand that it doesn't meet those, but I was wondering if there is a way that an exception can be made, so that my credentials can be legitimized here in the state of Texas in the same way that they were legitimized in the UK.
Mr. Spinks.
One possible parachute for Dr. Sharp. Y'all added the remedy for incomplete supervised experience, the remediation deal after the Stanley issue. I'll call it the Stanley rule. That says an applicant who has at least 1,500 hours of formal internship and 1,500 hours of postdoc, if they don't meet all the requirements of subsections A, C, and D, you can allow them to remediate, or in theory, you could waive any deficiencies there or make them remediate. The 1,500 hours of internship, just for argument's sake, let's say she's got 1,500 hours in that master's program. In theory, under that rule, I mean, you could read that rule and say, well, look, she's got 1,500 hours of formal internship. We're going to waive the requirement that it have taken place during the doctoral program. And then as far as 1,500 hours of postdoc, Monica just tallied up at a max, she's got 1,500 hours. And so it looks like maybe on its face, she might meet the threshold of that rule.
Hang on. So are you saying if we count those hours before the doctoral conferral? Because I'm reading here the postdoc is totaling actually our supervision after the doctoral degree is 625.
Right, but Monica said if you counted that Dr. was it McAdams, Monica, or Adams?
Yes,
yeah,
Dr. Adams.
Okay, if you counted Adams, did that tally up to 1,500, Monica?
I did a rough estimate and I got about 1,520, and that's from December 10th to August of 2001.
We have documentation of that span of time from conferral to where kind of our initial, I guess, start date for that was.
Okay.
We have documentation on that.
We have the supervision forms. However, we don't have an actual doctoral transcript. And back in her 2009 application, she stated that they can't provide an actual transcript. Now, again, this was all prior to my existence here, so I don't have access to an actual transcript. But that's where the foreign evaluation came in.
Yeah, however, if I may just say this real quickly for our reference, there is, from what I understand, a problem with the supervision hours that Dr. Adams provided, because we're, again, in the same area on the form, rationale for denial, it says deficiencies. It does say that the postdoc supervision from December 10th, 2000 to August 31st, 2001 was not under a licensed psychologist, unless that's a mistake, but that's what it says here, but rather a university professor, Dr. Adams, deceased. This supervision does not meet the requirements.
Dr. Becker?
I think that's what Dr. Sharp was trying to explain earlier, might be a translation issue about professors and psychologists and international. And I'm a little less confused about that because we have had that independent evaluation that says the master's equivalency, the PhD equivalency. I think my question for Dr. Sharp is, it sounds like you have been in queue with this board for a considerably long time. And I guess my question is, have you been practicing as a provisionally licensed psychologist for a good number of years?
I have not done direct practicing in as much you would consider clinical supervision of students direct clinical practice. So I've been doing in our clinical psychology program, we, as you know, provide internal practicum experience in our own UH-based clinic, and I've been supervising students in that. And so that I think is under the board rules counted as clinical services, but it's not me delivering the clinical services directly. It is my students in our program, our students in our program, but I supervise their experience.
So you're providing direct clinical supervision, but you're not actually receiving any supervision under a provisional license.
No, I am not receiving supervision because I'm in an exempt agency. So when you're in an exempt agency, you do not actually need a license to do what I'm doing. So, you know, and I've been maintaining my provisional license all these years through continued education as the rules apply, but it all came to the front with the new rule that we can't continue on with those provisional licensure. And I just felt, you know, I should give it one last shot to see if there is a way that my atypical trajectory can be acknowledged.
I was really hoping you were going to say that there was some level of supervision or something happening in there as part of that provisional process that would make a really clean pathway under that remediation piece that we've got going on, that it was already existing for you.
The closest was when Dr. Fletcher, when I established our clinic, when he provided clinical supervision. That's exactly what Dr. Fletcher did for those 650 hours that one could count with the 1,500 that was part of the postdoc, the actual postdoc. That's what Dr. Fletcher did, but it wasn't the full 17 that's needed. You know, it was 650 that was added to, you know, it could be seen as added to the postdoc, even though it doesn't, again, meet the exact box that this needs to fit into.
Monica has her hand up. Monica,
Yes.
go ahead.
Yes, sir. And back to what Dr. Becker was saying, that's in that initial email, again, prior to receiving legal representation, I did email her saying, hey, do you have any other additional supervision? Our rules do allow for teaching as part of supervision, but again, it does have to meet all that criteria, being under licensed psychologist and all the other criteria that we have listed, but nothing was submitted. But there is that avenue. Just, I don't think she has anything that meets that.
Yeah. Thank you, Monica.
So under new remediation rules, is there a way that we could request that those additional hours are like that she go under supervision again in terms of from clinical work perspective? Is that something that we'd be able to, is that a workaround that we can, is that even a normal possibility? Right?
I think that's up to the board. Essentially, if y'all have ideas on how to do that, but it just feels like there's a lot of things here that are missing.
I think it was Mr. Spinks who raised that question, and he was on the phone when you were asking Dr. Cartwright that he didn't hear your question.
I'm back. Sorry. Yeah. DPS again.
So my question was more or less from a remediation perspective of that we've been working on over the last year. Is it in the realm of possibility where the additional hours are being supervised under a licensed psychologist in a practitioner setting, which I know she's already in, you know, in the clinic at Houston and all of that, but to have someone actually essentially like it would be in another postdoc where still the supervision does occur with someone over to get those additional hours, is that out of the realm of possibility?
No, she could get somebody to supervise her for the additional, whatever their balance is between 625 and 1750.
Okay.
I mean, that probably seems like the pathway that we need to go is I don't think that we want to deny licensure for someone who is practicing in the role that you're practicing in, Dr. Sharp. I think it is trying to bring you up to the minimal criteria if you are willing and able to get sort of the discrepancy in the supervision gap is really probably the piece I think that most of us are bumping on the most. So if there is a way to seek and document that supervision gap is probably the piece that would be needed.
That's exactly what I was getting at. I think if we could, I think as a board, we'd feel better about it if we could, you know, at least close that. I mean, that's a pretty important piece of licensure. And again, I know you go back to the whole overqualified. I mean, Dr. Sharp, much respect to all that you're doing and everything that you have done. But I do think that if we could meet that remediation piece, I think I'd feel more comfortable.
Two cases that since I've been on board had a similar situation, Dr. Stanley and Dr. Leslie Kelly, and they both had a similar situation where they needed more hours of supervision, and they both were allowed to go and get that supervision. So what about, can we allow Dr. Sharp to also just get the remaining hours completed under a licensed psychologist, which are easily available in the academia?
Daryl?
Yeah, she could go get the remaining hours needed for her postdoc year.
Yeah.
Now, before we get too kumbaya on that, you've got to be willing to, we've got to make sure that her 1,500 hours of internship from a master's program would be acceptable to y'all under the remediation rule. When you read that rule, I think you probably just, as the PhD folks, you probably read into that, 1,500 hours of doctoral level, whether it be as part of the doctoral program or afterwards. But that rule doesn't say that. It doesn't put that kind of requirement, but I think that's probably what most people just naturally imply into it. So what I'm trying to say is, you don't want to tell her, look, just go get the remaining balance. She does it, and then she comes back and we go, well, yeah, but it's 1,500 hours of internship and a master's degree, therefore you still don't qualify. So if we tell her to go down this path, we probably need to decide, are 1,500 hours from a master's level training program and internship in that, which is maybe the apex in South Africa. Is that going to be acceptable under the remediation rule? If it's not, she doesn't even need to waste her time going to get the postdoc because it's not going to help her.
May I comment about this, that the master's degree we're talking about in South Africa is a terminal degree. It's not like the master's degree in Texas that everyone assumes will be followed later by a doctorate. The master's degree in South Africa was a terminal degree, and she was expected afterward. It was predicted that she would go out and practice clinical psychology.
And that, Dr. Flynn, that's why I'd asked Monica earlier, was it when it was evaluated to be the equivalent of a doctoral degree or a master's degree? Because I thought if it's evaluated as the equivalent of a doctoral degree, it's not, I don't think it's a problem. But
That's always what it was, correct? Like,
no, they said it was the equivalent of a master's degree in the US. And that's where how you read that rule, how you interpret it becomes important here.
I have a question about additional postdoctoral hours, because typically the postdoctoral hours have to happen in a particular time frame. Would it be because I'm full-time, I've got other work that I'm doing? Would it have to be in a particular time frame that those postdoctoral hours need to be obtained? Is there a cutoff time by which, because then I'll have to leave my current job in order to take full-time employment elsewhere under supervision to.
Under the existing rules, yes, but the whole point of the remediation rule is to say, we can give you an exception to that. If you have a minimum of 1,500 postdoc, 1,500 internship, we can give you a way out if it doesn't meet the timing requirements. Now, I'll be honest with you, Doc, I can't make you a promise right here and now that this board will say on, if you go back and get your hours, that they're going to say, yes, we'll excuse the fact that it took her more than 24 months to get all of her postdoc hours. But I don't know. I think I'll just say this. I think that'd be kind of Chicken Little of us to suggest this course of action and then hang her up on the back end and say, oh, well, you didn't do it within 24 months. So now we're going to hit you over the head with that. I don't vote, but I wouldn't, that doesn't sit well with me if we did that.
Monica.
Yes, sir. There's kind of one hang up. She would need to be doing that supervision in an exempt setting because technically her license has reached its expiration date. So she would have to make sure that she's in a position where she can get those hours. I know we do have a rule that does allow them to get their formal internship post their degree. I just don't know how that fits into the remediation rule. So under 463.11A1, if she got her degree prior to 2017, she can get supervision after that. Again, I just don't know how that plays in with that remediation rule.
When you say supervision, are you referring to the internship?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, it's formal internship that was completed prior to the degree.
That only becomes important if they say we're not going to accept the. Does she have 1,500 hours of internship in that master's internship?
That I don't know. I don't think so. I have to go back and check my other notes. Give me a second.
I believe that it was a 1,500-hour internship. That's probably a better question for Dr. Sharp.
Problem is that the internship forms don't, she submitted the old internship forms, which back then we were looking at consecutive months. So there's no total hours. So everything that I've been trying to calculate is just based on how many hours a week did you typically work and that kind of stuff. So I don't have any documentation of exactly how many hours were in each.
Dr. Sharp, you're on the record here. Treat it as though you're under oath. How many hours did you do in that internship?
Well, I'll have to calculate it, but it was a full-time internship for 12 months, 5 days a week. So
sharpen your pencil, go to it.
Okay, I'm going to do that right now. I'm frazzled, so I'm slow, sorry.
Well, don't get too frazzled about that. I think probably I don't mean to speak out of turn here, but I think probably what we need to do is decide, assuming she has the 1,500 hours, will we accept it?
I think we would assume that she would have 1,500 hours working full-time for 12 months in an internship. We would certify for more than that in a full-time 5-day-a-week internship if you are working regular hours, unless Dr. Sharp, you were working 4 hours a day, which no intern in their mind typically does if you're working full-time. We would certify you for more than 1,500 hours generally.
I have calculated it's 2,080.
Okay. Dr. Sharp, Dr. Flynn, I want to we've dedicated a lot of time to this. I would like to try to get the board to a position where we can make some decisions. Do y'all have anything to close with?
No, we are done. We appreciate the board's attention to this. We're through talking, both of us.
Okay, good deal. Thank you to you both for being here, for the clarity. Board, what other discussion? Do we have any suggestions on how to handle this?
I'm just going to say I'm going to abstain from this because I knew Dr. Sharp for a number of years at Menninger. So I won't be inputting on this one.
Thank you,
I feel
Mr.
uncomfortable. Yeah.
You're going to recuse yourself?
Yeah.
Herman? Okay.
Yeah.
You know, again, I think there's the two issues here is, are we okay with that master's, equivalent and, or, I don't know if that part of the piece was like this, that was in South Africa. If we're okay with that, and we can move forward with that translation piece, waiting to doctoral. I think that's the key, and then obviously the remediation piece, would be where I feel like if we could get those additional hours under supervision, I think that's kind of the route. That's my line of thinking right now, but I'd like to hear what everybody else's thoughts are.
Also, if you want to put that in the form of a motion that can be amended and debated, that could keep us moving forward if that's where you are on it. Mark.
Okay, I move to further discuss the equivalency of the master's / doctoral internship, along with remediation efforts for postdoctoral hours.
Okay, I guess it's not what that's a, okay, so we are discussing it, so if the motion is to discuss, we can continue.
The motion is to remediate. Is
If
the
there is a
motion to
motion to
remediate
That would be,
and,
yeah,
right?
yes.
The motion is to build a remediation plan for Dr. Sharp. Is
Would
that
it be
what we're
something?
talking about?
Yeah, would it be something like, I move that,
It'd be like a move to approve
move
with
to,
something X hours, X requirement, X requirement, X requirement.
move to approve with recognition of the 1,500 hours of internship from the master's degree, South African master's training program, and approval of her application upon demonstration of X number of hours of postdoc completed.
Correct. I'm really looking to the professional members here because this is y'all's wheelhouse to really determine what's appropriate here.
So Daryl, you had brought up earlier, sorry, Mr. Spinks, you had brought up earlier that we wouldn't want to promise a pathway if the 1,500 hours were the hours on that, that the previous hours, I guess there were 1,500 for the master's program, were not something that we could utilize. Then I don't know that we ever got to the discussion that we agreed that they were something that we could utilize. Again, going back and just kind of keeping us kind of, sequentially kind of moving forward. And maybe I missed that part. I don't know.
No, and I think I don't know that what I said was correct whenever I said you can't promise. I think you could say, look, doc, we're going to take the 1,500 hours. If y'all decide that here, we're going to take the 1,500 hours and we'll give you the license once you have completed X number of hours of postdoc under the supervision of a licensed psychologist. I think you could do that under the authority given under the remediation rule, because you have the authority. Once she has demonstrated the 1,500 hours of internship and 1,500 hours of postdoc, you guys can then waive whatever deficiency she has in 463.11 A, C, or D. So it really won't matter if she does her postdoc outside of a 24-month period and all that other jazz. None of that's going to matter because you have the ability to waive it. But you don't have the ability to waive the 1,500 hour requirements of internship and postdoc. And that's really all that's hanging her up here.
Do we have a motion on the floor, or are we I like the way Mr. Spinks has stated, and that would be the best option, in my opinion.
So if that's the case, Daryl, would you state what you said in the form of a motion that could be taken? Not that Daryl's making the motion.
Yeah.
But if you can restate that for us, for the benefit of Dr. Singh, when she's asked.
I move that the board approves Dr. Sharp's application pursuant to the authority of 463.11 sub G, and recognize the 1,500 hours of formal internship that she has acquired, so long as she completes X number of hours of postdoc supervised experience under a licensed psychologist.
Dr. Singh, is that
Yes.
what you're asking for?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, Dr. Sharp, if they do that, you need to understand, like what Ms. Fierro said earlier, you're not going to get a new provisional license. You're going to have to stay in your exempt position and get somebody to supervise you in the delivery of services there, whether it be teaching or whatever. You're going to have to get somebody to supervise you there because we're not going to give you another provisional license. Which candidly, that really shouldn't operate as a hardship to you. You're already in an exempt setting. You just got to find somebody to supervise.
You know, in academia, there are plenty to supervise the teaching and her work that she's already doing that can be supervised, and she can acquire. I mean, she can acquire those hours very quickly within a year.
So there is a motion on the floor from Dr. Singh, correct, Dr. Singh?
Yes, go ahead.
So there's a motion on the floor from Dr. Singh to approve it with those additional hours being required. Is there a second? All right, and it's been seconded by Dr. Cartwright. Is there any further discussion?
I just want to, again, clarify, are we adding any sort of time constraint to that? Can it be done in 5 years? Can it be done in 3 years, in a year? What are people's thoughts?
What about, I mean, I kind of think 2 years is fairly reasonable. Given that being in the setting she's in, there probably are quite a few LPs. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but that would be my thought, but that was just my initial thinking. So again, for discussion, what do you all think?
Well, I keep going back to the number of hours that she completed in her master's program, at least in the information that was provided to us. And the number that stands in my mind was something like 609. And I'm sorry, but I don't have I don't have access to my materials because I'm attending another meeting and don't have a double screen. And the other thing was, in 2009, she was given the opportunity to remediate and to have someone supervise her with the 1,500 hours. Is that not correct? And she didn't do that then in 2009. So why are we accepting 1,500 hours that can't be verified with the master's program? And she was given the opportunity in 2009, according to the information that Margot provided. So why are we doing this?
Because she has asked for it.
Okay.
All right, so we still have a motion on the floor. It sounds like there's a question. The discussion is, should there be a time frame attached to this, is sort of the discussion right now.
I think 2 years is reasonable. I do think not prolonging this, given that we've set limits on the provisional license, and this is someone who has had a provisional license for an excessive period of time. If we're going to allow this opportunity, then there needs to be a time limit on it. I agree with that.
Dr. Singh, would you accept that as a friendly
Yes,
amendment?
from my experience with other candidates who have had similar situations, 2 years is more than sufficient.
Dr. Cartwright, would you still second that?
I would, but I do think maybe we should ask Dr. Sharp, how long she thinks it would take her. Just to ask. She brought up a point about what full-time position. I'd just like to hear her thought on that.
Thank you for considering this. I was not clear that one could get supervision on teaching, that would count as supervised hours. So if it includes teaching and not only direct clinical work, I think absolutely 2 years, I spend a lot of time teaching. But if you can verify for me that it may include teaching of clinical, clinical courses and clinical, supervision of clinical students, in the same way that Dr. Fletcher supervised me when we opened our clinic, then I think 2 years is extremely feasible for me. But I always thought it had to be direct clinical work.
Maybe we can get somebody to verify that for us as a board to see if that is actually true. I'm uncertain myself. I think one of the things that's important here, Dr. Sharp has been a researcher for a long time, and she sounds very interested in being a researcher. She has been an academician for a long time. And as a clinician, I think for whatever reason that has lagged behind, and I would have concern to continue to neglect that part of her training and to go forth with a full license and see individuals as a clinician. Just my concern, given the whole picture.
So can we confirm that, either Daryl or Patrick?
I'm looking to see in the statute now if teaching.
In the rules, in the definition for provision of psychological services, teaching is included in it, 465(1) sub 12.
Let me give you firsthand experience. It is done all the time in academia under teaching, psychology courses under a supervision of a licensed psychologist as considered supervised experience. And they have to meet once a week and do everything just like interns, in a direct services places. And it's done, and it's part of the, I think it's been practiced for not just recently, for years.
Patrick, that rule doesn't have teaching in it anymore. I remember a while back we took teaching out.
I'm looking at the Secretary of State version right now.
Yeah, where's teaching at in it?
Under 12, provision of psychological services. At the end of it, it says or teaching to an individual group.
Oh, okay. I thought we took it out. Never mind. It's in there.
No. So let me remind you, last year, Leslie Kelly was doing the same thing. He did teaching under supervision of licensed psychologists.
Yep, she's good.
All right, so Daryl gave that motion. It's been amended to include a 2-year time limit on it. It has been moved, it has been seconded. Is there any further discussion? Are you ready for the question?
I have one comment. I'm surprised that Dr. Sharp did not know this, and she could have easily met all her requirements long time ago.
Any further discussion? All right, y'all have heard the motion. All those in favor of approving it as part of that motion signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, say no. The ayes have it. Thank you guys very much for that very robust discussion. Daryl, you kind of had a statement earlier. I would really appreciate it for those in the public. Dr. Sharp, work with and compliments to Monica here as well. Our licensing team works very hard to get people licensed. We've dedicated a lot of time to this today in this board meeting. Doesn't have to be that way, but I'm glad we got to this end. And Dr. Sharp, we appreciate you, and go do good stuff.
I am deeply, deeply grateful. Thank you very much for this chance, and I will do good on my end. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Okay, guys, I'm trying to keep us on track. I thought this was gonna be a shorter meeting, so I didn't actually mention it to you guys. I have a hard stop here in about an hour, so we've got a couple things. I think we're still on track, but just for perspective, I'm gonna be adjourning this thing in 1 hour. But I do think we have enough time to give everything the time it needs. I have lost. Who are we going to next? We're gonna go to Carlos Smith for a reinstatement. Does anybody on staff want to lay this out for us?
I could just give the quick elevator speech on it. Dr. Smith was previously convicted, and he lost both his LSSP and LP license with us by an agreed it was the resignation in lieu of further adjudication. The time period under that order for not reapplying has since passed, and so he's now reapplied. And so, yeah, essentially it was conviction for, I believe, Medicaid fraud, which I believe he's completed all of his jail time and paid back all of the restitution for that. I also think his attorney, Catherine Greaves, should be, I thought I saw her in the attendee list. And I'm not sure if Dr. Smith is there.
Do they need to raise their hand for us to see them?
I see there's
There
Catherine.
we go.
Can you hear us now?
Yes,
Yes, thank you. This is Catherine Graves. I'm here and Dr. Smith is here as well.
very good. Do you guys want to we want to give you guys a chance to tell us what we need to know.
Yeah, and I'm going to let Dr. Smith speak for himself.
Very good.
I appreciate the opportunity you guys let me come in and just give you a little context. What I wanted to do is give you a little context of what happened without making it sound like I'm making an excuse. Because first and foremost, it wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a spur of the moment. It was a bad decision that I made. Back in 2016, 17, I was going through a lot of personal stuff, divorce, child custody battles, and everything like that. Around the same time, I invested in a company in Michigan, where I'm from, and where I was also licensed as a psychologist. Literally shortly thereafter, after the first few board meetings and shareholders meeting, I found that they were basically, they kind of got me for a lot of money. So I was enraged, I was mad, I was unreasonable, I was really in a mind frame of making really bad decisions. And in the sense of trying to get my money back, I formulated a game plan to get that $250,000 back from that company that I invested my personal money in. Well, it wasn't too long after that, a few months, where I realized the way I set up everything was not right, inappropriate, and with lack of better words, criminal. And at that moment, the fact that I didn't do anything right then and there, that is what made it criminal. Nevertheless, I was going through divorce and everything like that. And before charges was even filed, I tried to correct my decisions and paid the money back, hired a law firm, an auditing firm to, make sure they get in touch with the investigators and everything like that. So between February of 18 and June of 18, the auditing team called the investigators, emailed them, left messages, no reply whatsoever. And of course, I was checking in, like, what's the update? What's the, how much money do I have to give back? Do I have to give it all back? And then he finally called back, my attorney in the end of June, said they finally called us back. I said, great. How much money was the fee? And they said, well, it's not a fee. You've been indicted. I said, indicted? Indicted for what? And they said, well, Medicare fraud. And so that started the process back in June 2018. So even though I paid the money back, even before charges was filed, I'm not sure if anyone ever had to deal with the federal government, it's a full steam ahead. So I pled guilty because under the letter of law, I was wrong and I committed a crime. And they also came down to Texas to check out the companies that I own in Texas, and all of that checked out, thank God. They did all kind of audits and stuff like that. But in saying all of that, I just wanted to make sure that the committee knows that I'm not making excuses. Although I was mad and angry and going through personal stuff, it was my decision to make. And in a span of, let's say, 13, 14 months, I lost a lot. So the way I kind of rectified the situation was, because back then I was very arrogant, very beyond reproach. I didn't eat, and people who were close to me were saying, Carlos, you may, something's going on. And no, I blamed it on the divorce and everything like that. But since that time, I went in and got counseling. I went in and got therapy. I had to turn my license in Michigan, needless to say, but I don't have any interest in owning any kind of company outside of the state of Texas. I kind of got rid of the family and the court stuff in that regard. And I'm just taking steps to correct my life, because even if this in particular situation didn't happen, I was really spiraling out of control back in 16 and 17, to be honest. Since then, needless to say, the company that I was with, my employer, back in 2018 and 19, is the same employer I have today. I'm not functioning in the same capacity, of course. I'm not a psychologist, but I'm a case manager. And of course, if I ever was to get licensed again, a position is waiting for me, of course. At this point, I don't mind, if I was to be considered to obtain my license again, I don't mind any kind of practice monitoring. I don't mind if I never can bill or have my own practice again. I don't care about any of that. I don't care if I needed to have supervision, because a few of my colleagues is more than willing to supervise me, because besides this issue in Michigan and this very bad decisions I made leading up to Michigan and during Michigan, I have a long history of doing really good work, and doing a lot of good work in a lot of different components. So that's just a little bit of context to the actual event. And like I said, I'm just giving you a little bit of context. I'm not making any excuses, because at the end of the day, I pled guilty, and I pled guilty because I did it. The reason behind it, is kind of, not really consequential, but I did want to give it a little bit of context as far as what was going on in my mind frame, and more importantly, what I've done at this point, compared to where I was in 2017, because I may have lost a lot of money, lost my family, but today compared to then, I'm 10 times at a better place now than I was then. And I appreciate the consideration, guys.
Yeah, and this is Catherine Graves. I'm going to encourage Carlos to maybe go into this a little more depth, because I think it does play into this. There was also at the time, you were undiagnosed with bipolar disorder, and kind of through all of this, when he started entering counseling, that was diagnosed, and he's remained under treatment since that time and has that under control. And again, since that time, he's also done, really pulled his life together in the sense of, I think this is in our, petition. He's, had steady employment. He has an employer who's willing to take him on. There's a school district that's willing to take him on. So, they're aware of kind of how he is and how he works now, as well as he's continued to do volunteer work, and works with suicidal prevention programs in the Houston area. And I don't know if you want to elaborate on that anymore, but I think that was a piece that was missing from your description that is important.
Yeah, and I didn't want to gloss over that aspect. But when I first engaged in counseling, it wasn't my first time going to counseling, whether it was family counseling, couple counseling, or just individual counseling. It was alluded to that, well, maybe something's going on, Carlos. Maybe we might want to look into bipolar. But of course, back then I'm not going to counseling. I'm not being diagnosed. I'm Dr. Smith, and just really arrogant. But over time, I owned it. I'm being treated for it, and I don't look at it as a per se negative thing, as long as I'm taking care of it and it's being treated, and I'm going about my life accordingly.
Very good. Dr. Smith and Ms. Greaves, thank you very much for being here and giving us some context and color on that. All right, any questions from the board?
What kind of precedent do we have for this? These kind of issues, like former.
I'll say that the challenge, this is something that we've dealt with in terms of people with criminal histories coming back to be licensed. And there's been a lot of discussion on that, on what crimes constitute something that we would not let somebody into the profession or back into the profession over.
Right.
And if you go to the our response for the staff, essentially response to this, And I'll go ahead and read it for everybody here. Staff identified concerns with your application and demonstrate that it doesn't meet requirements, blah, blah, blah. Notes the conviction for insurance healthcare fraud. This is kind of the key operator here. Your conviction directly relates to the duties and responsibilities of a licensee according to 22 Texas Administrative Code. So that's the kicker, is that this directly corresponds to practice. And that's why we're here talking about it. Because I forget what it was. There was something that was I forget what the crime was. It was not a good, it was bad crime. I mean, not that any crime is good, but bad crime. But it didn't pertain at all to practice. And we're like, you can't really prohibit that. Because there's got to be a pathway back for people who have, committed a crime to be in a profession. That said, as a licensing board, licensees are placed in a position of trust, public trust, from the state of Texas to the public. And, that's why this got denied. Daryl?
Yeah, I was going to ask Dr. Smith or Ms. Greaves, you're asking for reinstatement of your LSSP license. And I'm just wondering, would you even be eligible or able to practice in the schools? I don't see a school hiring you with this kind of a criminal history. And I know they're going to conduct a background check on you.
I can't say sir, I can't say for sure. But I fully expect any place I go for employment to do a thorough background check.
Okay.
Mr. Adler, does that help answer the question? You're on mute.
Yes, I think you did. I was just wondering, was that the staff's view? Is that the staff's view on directly? I mean, yes, it does, obviously, but is that an actual rule that we have? If it's a crime that directly correlates with practice, that they can never be reinstated.
Well, it doesn't say that they can never. It's discretionary, but there are some factors you have to look at that are set out in chapter 53 of the Occupations Code.
Yeah.
But well, that's just all I can really say about that.
Patrick? Sorry, go ahead, Herman.
I was just going to say, if he's willing to be monitored under the strictest, way with, zero tolerance kind of thing, provide us, drug compliance community, that kind of stuff. I think it should be considered. I don't know if I would vote yes or no, but I mean, that's what it would take, I guess, for us to feel comfortable, or if any, or at all. So I think that'd be the only way.
So Herman, you asked about precedents too. The idea of resigning one's license in lieu of essentially
okay, is that what he did?
That's about as bad as it gets in terms of
Okay.
Patrick.
Yeah, I was just going to mention what the rules and the law requires is when he was convicted of an insurance or Medicaid, Medicare fraud, that's an automatic. We have to revoke him or take his license away. And there's also a provision because he was imprisoned, he had to, by operation of law, he was going to lose his license, so we had to take it away. Now the rules that kick in say that the board may deny the license based on the conviction. There's not a shall or a requirement to do it, like a no discretionary requirement. So essentially you're left with three options. You could approve him outright, you could deny him, or you could go the third path, which is an eligibility order, which is approve him with stipulations for his license.
And this is Catherine Graves, at least in the near future, and you can consider this, but he's going to be, if he gets his license back under an order, he would be under the employ of another company. So billing would not be part of his responsibilities. Because it would be the employer's billing numbers. And so it would be their billing company that would, do all the billing. So he would not be in that position.
Thank you. And Donnie, you had your hand up. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I was gonna ask the lawyers, is this qualify for a heinous crime?
Well, heinous isn't, it's not really it's not really a legal definition. That's generally something, it's more in the lay vernacular. There is, I think probably what you're asking about, Mr. Zaguris, is whether it's like a chapter 108, which is a psychology and social work are the only ones that this applies to, but it's basically the capital punishment section of the occupations code. And I don't think this, Patrick, this doesn't fall under, this is not a 108 offense, is it?
No, that would, no, it doesn't fall under 108.
108 is just a hard no. Y'all don't even have discretion. We wouldn't have even really brought it to you. It's just a hard no.
Well, the reason I was asking, Daryl, is because you mentioned earlier that the man's gonna have a hard time getting the job, no one's gonna hire him. Regarding the schools, I mean, there are people in schools working that have a criminal history now. They're not gonna hire somebody that's a pedophile that did some sexual abuse, because obviously they're around children, and those kind of things. That was my intent regarding asking about a heinous crime. A heinous crime says that it's like more than stupid or something like that, you know? And so he had no guilt or any conscience on his mind, and he does things that he, beyond the realm is what I would look at the word heinous. So, I mean, the man, we have to consider, he's saying he's rehabilitated. Probably if we got reports from his doctors and therapists, they're going to say he's rehabilitated, or he wouldn't be here reapplying for his license.
Dr. Becker?
I had emailed Patrick and asked him to send me some legislation about this. So I had done a little bit of homework, and I was just curious. There are some stipulations around what we need in order to even consider reinstating this license, as I understand it. And one of my questions is, do we have everything that we need submitted to even take this into consideration? As far as things like, I mean, I know we have the extent of his criminal activity, but do we have things like the letters of recommendation and where he is, how far he is from? Do we have all of the tick boxes that we need submitted?
I don't think there's an actual laundry list of things that is required. They can submit whatever they want, and we have everything that they've submitted.
I think what Dr. Becker's talking about is what's in the occupations code. Is that what you're talking about in 50?
Yeah.
023?
I thought, yeah.
And I believe everything that's been submitted by the applicant and his attorney it should be in there.
It meets the evidence that we need.
But there's like a list of 7 items in there, which is but to your question, going through what they've submitted, I don't know. I don't 100% know if we have every single box checked on here. I think there's some of it, but I don't recall off the top of my head. If there's something specific you want to ask the applicant on it.
Yeah, I think what about like probation? Any reports from like probation officer, or like I don't know if you get a letter. But something that attests to his compliance with court orders. I just came from that kind of job, so.
Dr. Andler, that would not be a problem. I actually was released from supervised release a year in advance for
computer supervision.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Yeah. Anything documentation as far as your compliance and or any from your direct probation officer, I think is something we would have to have if we were going to.
That would not be a problem whatsoever. He's actually going through a divorce right now, and we sometimes talk about the trials and tribulations.
You still on probation? Oh no, you finished a year early.
Yeah, I finished a year early.
And you're on probation for how long?
It was originally 2 years and then they cut it after a year.
And what were your conditions or probation?
I could not occur any new legal charge. I could not work in any capacity with Medicare or Medicaid, which I will never do ever again,
What
regardless.
is this? Were you on probation or supervised release?
Supervised release.
Okay, did you serve actual time in the federal pen?
Yes, I did.
Okay, so yeah, just to be clear, supervised release is something very different from probation. Probation is what you do in lieu
Right,
of.
I used the wrong term. Yeah.
Yeah,
You're
yeah,
right. You're right.
okay, I
Daryl. Parole. I meant
yeah,
parole.
we'd call it parole in
Parole.
the state system.
Parole. Yes. Wrong term. Yeah.
So supervised release was originally 2 years, and then I completed 50% of it.
And
But
with
that was all
no
you had to.
Right.
Yeah,
Of course.
it was
yes,
reduced.
yes.
and with no like no like admonishments or no like
No.
Okay.
No. And we had to submit to the judge asking and telling him all of this stuff, everything I'm telling you as far as therapy, counseling, and for him to consider, that to let me off a year early, and he complied.
All right. What other questions? Discussion?
I have, if I may, just some comments for us to consider, some things for us to consider. I can definitely understand Mr. Smith or Dr. Smith's, his journey and the difficult circumstances, personal and professional, of course, that have brought him really kind of to us in this today, and kind of going through the request to, grant him his license again. My concern, though, given the diagnosis, and I'm all for second chances. I think, we all at different points need mercy, if I dare say that, and, just the ability to redeem ourselves and start again. But I also think we need to do that in a very tempered, in a very cautionary way, and especially given the circumstances. And I think it's incredibly helpful, the diagnosis that was given, because it helps put all of the symptoms, all the behaviors that led to this place in the past, the difficulty with judgment, probably the things that contributed to the divorce and all of those things. And I think even Dr. Smith kind of alluded to some difficult, I think Dr. Smith, you said something like, my life was spiraling out of control in 2016, 2017, right up until 2018 when all of this kind of happened. My concern is this, and it sounds like right now things are working well. That life is, kind of measured, and you're adhering to medications probably, and, working and controlling stress and all of these different things. My concern, though, is that bipolar is a lifelong illness, chronic, I should say. And so going forward towards the future, I'm not sure that how can we safeguard, and assist Dr. Smith from falling into the same, issues in terms of, kind of having another episode that leads him down a similar path and causes harm. How can we provide, if we look into this, or maybe develop, some sort of a plan going forward where we can kind of maybe monitor in some way, if that's certainly in our purview, how, whether or not these points that have been, delineated are working in terms of helping to prevent another episode like this. Because, I mean, when Dr. Smith, when you said, I was arrogant and I forget what you said, something like untouchable. I can't remember exactly your exact terms. I mean, that can be part of bipolar disorder and the grandiosity. So I don't know. I just put that out there for all of us to kind of discuss further.
No, I think it can be. It just can't be into perpetuity. There has to be. Is that right, Daryl?
We have, while y'all were talking, I was trying to look up, we had another individual one time that came back in, and we actually restricted their practice to a certain type of practice where they would have, we knew they would have structured oversight. They could never be a solo practitioner. And I cannot for the life of me remember that licensee's name, and I'm gonna have to hit Patrick up after this to see, but you can put permanent restrictions on their license as a condition of this.
And that includes like reports from their like mental health treatment.
You could.
We get that.
I don't know that I would want to
invasive?
do that to us.
Yeah, we don't want to, putting something on the board in terms of keeping tabs on something, yeah, I'm with Daryl on that one. Especially in perpetuity.
But at least we can do it for like kind of.
And I would like to say also, I think those concerns are very, very valid. And I'm willing to go the extra mile, even if the restrictions is indefinite, that I can never bill. I'm okay with not having that headache. I'm okay with not, that privilege being taken away from me. I totally would be okay with it, with no argument whatsoever. And also, just the biggest thing with being diagnosed with bipolar is the recognition and the acceptance of it. I think, as far as going forward, just not denying it. It may seem like a small component of it, but that will definitely bode well going forward in the future and preventing other things of that sort. And it may sound also like a small thing, but I'm totally over that woman. Okay. Yeah. So, but I really appreciate your concerns and you voicing those, Dr. Lambda, because they are very valid. Very.
I have one more question for you,
Yeah, keep
Dr.
going,
Smith.
Herman.
Like, what'd you say?
No, I said keep going. I want to make sure you were still talking a minute ago. I want to make sure you still have the floor.
Yeah. How would you say this experience, especially being diagnosed with bipolar disorder, how could it have made? How can it have made? How would you say, or might make you a better clinician now going through this? When obviously clients have bipolar disorder a lot, and you're kind of denial of it, or you're kind of accepting of it and taking medication. Tell me about kind of how you would view that before and now with your clients.
Okay. Well, before, of course, I would take it serious, but just knowing not only the symptoms and how to treat it and the textbook and cookie cutter method of going about treating that disorder or treating the symptoms and seeing the patient. Now you kind of get a sense of how it is, not only on a daily basis, but by a moment-to-moment basis, by an occurrence to occurrence basis, by a stressor to stressor basis, and how, because for better or for worse, the last few years, I've been able to see a lot of different individuals in very stressful situations that, especially with COVID, that I'm able to really grasp and really empathize, and I'm not proud of this moment I had, but I've reflect back on it frequently. I was literally in my dream house, bought my dream car, and I was absolutely miserable, compared to how I am today, even though I lost a lot. Just the recognition of what's important, and professionally and personally.
I appreciate your candor.
All right, guys. Any other?
I appreciate your vulnerability and your openness and coming and talking with us today, Dr. Smith. I really, really do. I have to be honest, I'm struggling a little bit with what is in our purview to do here and how to respond to your request, because I think what's challenging is that we are being asked to make decisions based on what is in the best interest of the people of Texas. And you have been committed of a crime that harms people in the practice of your licensure. And so that's a really hard decision for folks in our position to make. And I think you're watching us struggle through that. And we're taking it very seriously. So I'm just going to speak for myself here and saying that's really a struggle for me to be in the position of trying to determine what that looks like for you going forward and interpreting what this means. Because I am looking at these laws that say, if you have acted in the course of your professional activities and been convicted of a crime while doing it, I don't know what to do with that.
I will say, I don't think in my time on the board, this has never, kind of situation never come up. So I think, you know, even, I mean, I've never encountered this kind of applicant before. So yeah, it's difficult.
I have a question. With this kind of, let's say, crime, would the board allow an applicant for licensure?
In for the first time?
Yeah.
Well,
you'd be in the same situation you're in right now. It would have come to you to decide.
the difference is he did it as licensed when he was licensed Medicare fraud, and I don't know how you might do it when you're unlicensed, but I'm sure there's a way.
I mean, I think the other thing, well, hang on, is this?
Dr. Smith, how long, I've read your case, but tell me again, how long have you been practicing under the license?
Since 2011.
Okay, so when were you exactly convicted of the crime?
2019.
Most crime committed.
2000 what?
In 18.
18. So you were you in practice for about
I'm sorry, it's 2019. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. It was the beginning.
7 or 8 years, right?
Correct.
And only practice you've done is private practice?
No, I also worked in the school district, two school districts, and I also worked for 2 separate companies as well.
Oh, okay. So if you, let's say, could you make a living working for some organization where you don't have the same kind of conditions to make same kind of decision that you made that that was defined as criminal?
Correct. I'm actually at that position right now. I changed. I'm at the same company, but I changed positions. Now I'm just working as a case manager, where she's actually waiting to see the result of this meeting to see whether or not she's gonna hire me back on as a psychologist. But I won't have any say so as far as billing or anything like that.
Do they have other psychologists or psychologists to supervise you there?
You know what? At this current time, no. But I do have at least 3 colleagues that said they are willing to supervise me if need be.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion?
I have a question. What kind of stipulations could this body place on approval of granting him his license? I just don't have any idea what the stipulations might be. So it's kind of hard to make.
Well, I think a few have already been mentioned, like, you know, he's not involved in billing. He doesn't own his own business.
Yeah, you say no independent practice.
Not being involved in billing raises another question. I mean, you all are psychologists and you see persons. Can you actually perform your duty without billing?
Well, that's a good point. Dr. Smith, how would that work?
Well, with the current company, it's an autistic center. And some of my main duties would be program design, treatment of the children and stuff like that. But they are there being billed for other stuff that has nothing to do with me. It's more of a social support within that organization.
And this is Catherine. I'm going to jump in because one of the things that would, if he's an employed psychologist, you know, he would be working for a company or another psychologist, and it would be that company that would bill. So that company would bill for his services, but he wouldn't be in control of that. So there would be somebody there, presumably, you know, reviewing that he was on the premises, he was there that day, he provided the service, because that would become their responsibility.
Right.
That
I
he
mean, so
provided the
he is
service.
billing, he's the rendering provider, but
Yeah.
he's not the one in sending that, submitting to insurance.
Correct. I mean,
Actually,
you can do that.
Thank you. That helps a lot.
All right.
You want to reinstate both the LP and LSSP or one or the other?
Both.
Yeah.
Both.
All right.
Well,
Are we ready for a, is anybody prepared to make a motion?
I guess it's time.
The application
I
has
would
been
like
denied,
to-
correct? Oh, sorry, go ahead, Andoni.
I would like to move that we reinstate this man's license with the stipulation that he has nothing at all to do with billing. And that would have to be limit independent practice, because the only people that do direct billing are independent employees. If you work for a school or an agency, they always have like a billing person. All you do is put in the hour that you spent, and then you put in a certain code of the kind of work you did, and then you pass it off to a clerical person.
So the motion is to reinstate with the restriction of no independent practice and nothing to do with billing. Is Daryl, does that pass muster with something y'all can enforce?
I don't know that I would say no independent practice, because that implies that you may be wanting to have a supervisor. And if you do, that's fine, but I would almost say
Own your own business.
he has to be a W-2 employee of another, not a 1099, but a W-2, because I don't want independent contractor status.
Yes, I have a,
That's what I was.
that he, we put that his job would be salaried job, just like, I didn't know that legal term for that W-2 employee and not
Yeah, just has to be an employee. He has to work for the company.
All right,
It doesn't be salary.
Keep in mind though, if you're, even I salary myself with my company, so it's like, you got to be careful on just saying W-2. Essentially, like owning your own business though, where billing is occurring.
Daryl, can you write that?
Yeah,
Say has somebody who handles, like another person, individual designated person who, after he sees the client, handles all communication with your insurance company. And I'd also say that he doesn't see anybody who has Medicare or Medicaid.
Also, we could say not to own the business, that he'll be W-2 employee of a company or an organization, and not be in any way owning the business.
I have one other question as well on this. Is there a way for us to say, I know that we don't want to monitor whether the ongoing therapy is occurring and the medication management is occurring. I know we don't, as a board, that would be very tough to do that indefinitely for the rest of the, his licensed career. But is there a way to, I don't know, like, where we could just say that we're requiring that, so that if something did come up, or we, later on down the road, if we found out that he was out of treatment or whatever, and things are, almost like, I know, I'm not saying like word of mouth, but essentially without making us monitor it, but we're putting that in as a stipulation of.
Is that a agreed order?
I'm just.
Yeah,
just
this is
throwing
going to
that
be
out.
an eligibility order is what he'll get.
Adherence mental health treatment.
Go this right way.
Dr. Becker, you were going to say something a minute ago.
Yeah, I'm sitting here listening to this and it's like, well, can we add this? Can we tweak that? I'm getting increasingly uncomfortable that what it sounds like is folks are not comfortable with where Dr. Smith is to practice at this point in time. So every time we add another stipulation, I'm just not sure that he has met our concerns, that he is all the way there yet for how far it's been since this crime occurred. So
You're right. Dr. Becker, right now we have an unseconded motion on the floor. So if we unless there's a second for that one right now, the floor is open for a motion.
Let me just add one more thing, just quickly, Dr. Becker. It's not, to me, the conditions are are not in relation to concerns about him. It's in relation to his conviction. And it's what we have to do to make sense of it. It's not that I'm concerned. It's just a matter of what's a natural consequence of his criminal history. So that's how I feel.
Dr. Lambden?
Yeah,
My only concern is.
Hang on, Dr. Singh. I mean, Dr. Singh, hang on. Dr. Lambden?
yes, I think that we need to really look at the broader context of the diagnosis and I kind of echoing on what Dr. Becker said. Although, like I said, I am very moved, by Dr. Smith and, his humility and vulnerability in coming here. And I completely understand wanting to get on with your life after an event like this.
Daryl, and then Dr. Singh.
Again, we go back to, what we're doing here, and we have to look at the diagnosis of bipolar. And bipolar really, I mean, the things that happened have to do with a lapse in judgment. It has to do with pleasure-seeking behavior. And I'm not saying anything about, Dr. Smith in particular, but I'm just saying we, in essence, are knowing, and it's different if you have an applicant that has undiagnosed bipolar disorder. As a board, we don't know that when we grant a license. But now, in this particular case, we do. And there are all sorts of potentials, negative potentials, working with very vulnerable populations such as autistic children and just, school side or what have you. If that disorder is not well monitored, managed.
Thank you.
So that's just my concern.
Daryl?
What, Dr. Smith, have you applied with Michigan also?
No, and I don't plan to.
Do you intend to apply anywhere else, any other jurisdictions?
Right now, I'm focused on Texas. I mean,
Okay,
my
right.
family, my 3 children are in Texas. I just want to live and be in Texas and work in Texas.
Okay, right now. Let me share one story with the board, and y'all give whatever weight you want to it. But we had an individual that under different facts, but resigned a license in the same manner that Dr. Smith did, had 3 or 4 licenses in other jurisdictions. Basically kind of went forum shopping whenever he got done with his probation, or got out of whatever the trouble was, and came back to us, and we were the first to reinstate his license, which then started causing a trigger effect in the other jurisdictions. They were at that point, they would never have let him in had he applied directly with them, but because we let him back in, it then made it very difficult for them to then deny him because we had done this. So the reason I asked that, I don't know, and I'm not trying to cast any aspersions here, but it's hard to judge people's sometimes intentions and true intentions here. And this is awkward for me to say because he's here, but it's got to be said. We got to think about what we do here may affect others outside of our borders as well. This is one of those areas where you're not only looking out for Texans, but sometimes you're looking out for others as well. We wouldn't want another jurisdiction to give somebody a license with this, and then thereby it kind of take the discretion away from us. So just understand there could be ripple effects outside of this beyond Texas here.
Mr. Spinks, may I respond to that, please? When I gave
only if the chair allows it.
I'm so sorry.
We are, if you make it very quick, I'm trying to give you all the time that you need, but we are on a schedule right now. So
okay, less than 30
usually we
seconds.
don't give this much time, but go ahead.
Mr. Spinks, when I gave my license back to Michigan, I'm not sure of the terminology, but I said I will never reapply again to Michigan. I'm really just focused on being here with my kids. So I just wanted to let you know that there is no possibility of me reapplying to Michigan.
Thank you, sir. Okay. There was a motion on the floor. There's not been a second. Without a second, that motion dies.
I just think we need to, as far as the eligibility order, we just can't just do it like so quickly, like, at the end of the meeting, like I feel like it had to be.
Mr.
followed
Bridges, Mr. Bridges had one suggestion. If y'all are wanting to do an eligibility, or you could say, look, we're willing to do it, and we'll leave it up to the apps committee to negotiate the terms of that. And then you wouldn't have to do it in here, but well, I mean, that's one option if you're short on time and you wanted to get this taken care of now.
So there's no motion on the floor. Currently, the application has been denied. Is that correct?
Correct.
So no motion means it dies, correct?
Well, he's appealed it up to the staff or up to the board level, so it's an up or down vote.
Okay, so somebody's got to make
Yeah, the board needs to make a decision.
Yeah, we need to make a decision, so.
I guess I'll be the bad guy then. I mean, I have to make a motion to deny the application. I am not ready to make all of these concessions. I'm just not sure that Dr. Smith is quite there with this.
Heard the motion. Is there a second?
I second.
Been moved and seconded to deny the application. Is there further discussion?
I have a question, just a
Yes, ma'am.
question real quickly. If it is denied today and it dies today, is there, after say maybe 2 years, 3 years, is there any opportunity for Dr. Smith to reapply? Given
think-
a history of 3 solid years perhaps, or what have you?
I think
Yes.
technically there's nothing to prohibit him from reapplying tomorrow. I don't think the outcome would be any different at that time, but I'm glad you asked that question.
Right, it just kind of helps us, but then of course, not guaranteeing any sort of, different response, but at least there would be a record of, solid employment in another area or similar area that doesn't require a license and, kind of, anyway, you understand stability.
Yeah, and if this is the record of the meeting, so even your question being asked is part of that record, so. Any further
I
discussion?
think it's a time issue here, just the amount of time since release, sort of seeing how we adjust and acclimate, to getting back into society and work and everything else, treatment. Those are all things to consider. I think that's what we're having a hard time with.
Dr. Becker, thank you for the motion. Dr. Calhoun, thank you for the second. Any further discussion? All right, all in favor of denying signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. I know this wasn't the outcome that you guys wanted today, and I think it provides, you can see it, we take no joy in our decision today. We appreciate you appealing it and bringing it this far.
I appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
You bet. All right. Moving on, we're almost done, guys and gal, ladies and gents. We're going on to rules 463. Sorry, we don't have any agreed orders, nothing from jurisprudence. The only rules we're looking at are awaiting an adoption recommendation, which is 463.11. This is the gap rule, which we are all pretty familiar with. Is there any discussion on that?
It also adds PC SAS as well.
Oh, that's right.
And it gets rid of the gap.
That's right. Side note, this was discussed today as PPP. People are talking a little bit more about PC SAS up there as well. So I'm glad we're moving this forward. Is there any discussion? Motion to adopt it, perhaps?
Motion to adopt.
Okay, the move by Dr. Becker. It looks like a second from Dr. Cartwright. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, say no.
Aye.
Thank you. The ayes have it. Recommendation agenda items for the next board meeting. We already talked about the rules that we're going to be working on to address one of our applicants today. So that's going to be on the next agenda. Is there anything from the floor that we need to put on the agenda? Okay, as always, if something does come to mind, feel free to email me and or Diane, and we will.
Actually, Mr. Belamowitz, I just have a quick suggestion for next agenda, and I don't know if
You
people
bet.
want to discuss that. I would like to discuss, if we may, consider limiting teaching experience or how much teaching experience can be used for a license.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ms. Moore, making a note of that. Thank you.
I just wanted to be sure that my vote for the last vote was an aye in favor of. I was late.
Thank you for clarification.
Okay.
All right. Anything else we need to cover, y'all? Move to adjourn. Is there a motion to
Seconded.
adjourn? Second, okay. Without objection, we're adjourned. Thank you very much for everybody's work and attention today.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
Have a good day.
You too.
Thank you.